Chapter 121. In Qin Manor, old Madam happily ordered people to prepare a sumptuous banquet. She also ordered people to guard the path that Qin Huaiyuan had to pass by every 50 steps. Once they saw Qin Huaiyuan's carriage, they would immediately enter the manor to report. Everyone stayed in C.I. Shao Garden to chat with old Madam. The joyous atmosphere was even livelier than the previous New Year's celebrations. Qin Yining naturally couldn't return to Shoren Pavilion first, so he could only stay here to chat. However, this wait lasted for 4 hours. The sky had darkened, but Qin Huaiyuan still hadn't returned. Old Madam became somewhat anxious. If there was a banquet in the palace, they wouldn't keep people here for so long. What kind of banquet needs to be held until so late? If the emperor wanted people to stay, he should at least consider the longing of his family after not seeing them for many days. In the end, old Madam revered the emperor and didn't dare to complain. However, she had already criticized him 1,000 times in her heart. Third Madam was the one who knew how to curry favor. Seeing old Madam's impatience, she smiled and said, "Eldest uncle has made a great contribution that will leave his name in history. It's appropriate for the emperor to keep him here to chat. Only eldest uncle can have such an honor. If it was someone else, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to receive such treatment in their lifetime." "That's right, grandmother." Qin Yining also joined in with a smile. "We're all family Qin people. It's easy to see father, but it's difficult for those officials and colleagues outside to talk to father. Why don't we take advantage of today's banquet to have a good chat?" Qin Yining had been the most doted on by old Madam for more than 10 years. Ever since Qin Yining returned, he had suppressed her in every aspect. Now that she was once again at old Madam's side, she was both emotional and excited. Naturally, she used all her skills to make old Madam happy. In old Madam's mind, the image of Qin Huaiyuan being the moon surrounded by stars appeared. When she thought of how her son had always been filial to her, her heart felt as if it had been soaked in a jar of honey, and she couldn't help but laugh heartily. Seeing that old Madam was happy, Third Madam and Qin Huaiyuan laughed and joked with old Madam. Sixth young miss, seventh young miss, and eighth young miss also joined in the fun, making old Madam beam with joy. Qin Yining sat with the third miss, drinking tea and chatting in low voices. He didn't have the slightest intention of going up to her. Third miss was already engaged, and the day of her marriage was not far away. Moreover, she was usually aloof from worldly affairs. On the other hand, Qin Yining had seen through old Madam's nature. She didn't want to beg for the pure familial affection that she had always longed for. In addition, old Madam didn't like her and the Sun Clan now. She wasn't the kind of person who would offer the right side of her face after being slapped on the left side. Just as the women folk in the room were talking and laughing, they suddenly heard a burst of hurried footsteps from outside, and a man's voice could be faintly heard. "It must be Meng Gub coming back." Old Madam smiled and looked at the door. But when the door curtain was lifted, the person who came in was Qin Huaiyuan's Chong Sui, Chi Tai. Chi Tai entered the door and knelt down with a plop. "Old Madam, something has happened in the palace." Old Madam and everyone's smiles froze on their faces. "Quickly say, what happened?" Replying to old Madam, there was a big banquet in the palace. Laoi and Madam also attended. The emperor rewarded Laoi. Because of Laoi's contribution in the peace talks, the emperor bestowed Laoi the title of Marquis of Anping. "This is a good thing," Third Madam said happily. Chi Tai kowtowed and said, "It's a good thing," but the empress then said that a hero like Laoi should have beauties to serve him. She chose Lu Jiu and Su Kairan from the emperor's palace and bestowed them to Laoi. She said that they were for bearing children. These two were favored by the emperor, and the emperor didn't object when he heard it. First Madam rejected the empress in public. Then the empress quarreled with First Madam. The empress said that First Madam was a jealous woman. First Madam insulted the empress as a demon empress, destroyed other people's families, and killed loyal people. All kinds of words were extremely sharp. In anger, the empress ordered people to kill First Madam, saying that she wanted to give her poison wine. The room was silent, and everyone's faces were pale. Qin Yining's mind was buzzing. She carefully looked at Qi Tai's face, trying to find a flaw in his words and expression. But Qi Tai's anxious and worried look was not fake. If it was said that the Sun clan's resentment towards the Emperor and Empress was really not small. But the people of the Sun clan, even if they were full of resentment, they did not have the courage to insult the Empress in person unless they were forced to. The grudge between the Duke Dingwa's mansion and the Chao family was not new. Even if the Sun clan hated the Empress these days, they could see the Empress when they went to the palace to pay their respects on the first day of the new year, but she did not see any discord between the Empress and the Empress. On the day she went out, the Sun clan had also lived in the palace for a while, and nothing happened during this time. It was clear that after the Sun clan suffered enough in the mansion, they had recognized the reality. What's more, the Sun clan's heart was full of Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Yining sometimes looked on coldly, and even felt that although the death of all the men in the Duke Dingwa's mansion was a big blow to the Sun clan, it was not as big as the blow that Qin Huaiyun took Madame Chao as a concubine. A woman like this, who was wholeheartedly devoted to her husband, was just given 2 palace concubines. After returning home, they could eat and drink well and be raised well. Qin Huaiyuan had concubines, so why would the Sun clan insult the Empress in the palace? Could it be that there was something fishy going on here? But the matter had already happened, and she couldn't have the slightest bit of luck. Qi Tai carefully explained the scene at that time to me. Qi Tai hurriedly nodded and said, replying to 4th young miss, I didn't see the scene at that time. It was after the incident inside that the master ordered an eunuch to come out and pass a message to me. I saw that the eunuch who passed the message was silent like a cicada in winter and didn't dare to say a word. I guess that Her Highness the Empress had a very big temper. You also know that His Majesty has always doted on Her Highness the Empress and can't bear for Her Highness the Empress to suffer any grievances. This time, eldest madam, really, no one could stop her from seeking her own death. Qin Yining rubbed the space between his eyebrows in pain and whispered a few words to Song Lan beside him. Song Lan nodded. Taking advantage of the fact that everyone in the room was still in shock and didn't notice her, she circled around them and left the old Madame C.I. Shao garden. Lifting her skirt, she quickly ran out. Qin Yining turned around and bowed to the old madam. Grandmother, what do you think should be done with the current situation? What should be done? The old madam was finally able to recover from her shock. The brass tobacco pipe in her hand angrily knocked on the table, knocking off a large piece of paint from the black inscriptions on the small table. Your mother, that ignorant and stupid woman, she dared to hoot in front of Her Highness the Empress. Even if she wants to die, she shouldn't have harmed others. Let her die. It's better if she dies. Although he had long expected that the old madam would have such a reaction, Qin Yining's heart still felt numb and twitching pain when he heard such heartless words from the old madam's mouth. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head in the middle of winter, freezing him from the inside out. Grandmother, even if mother is impulsive, it's also because of her sincerity towards father. Moreover, she has been our family Qin's daughter-in-law for more than 20 years. Even though she's your daughter-in-law, it's also equivalent to half a daughter to you. Shut up. The old madam interrupted Qin Yining's words and reprimanded. Half a daughter? What a nice way to put it. If I had such a daughter, I would have drowned her in the toilet long ago. Such an ignorant idiot. Such a slut who deserves to be hacked to death. She can't do anything well and can't even give birth to an egg. She actually wants to harm my son. Even if she dies, she shouldn't think about implicating the lives of our family Qin. Qin Yining pursed his lips and his gaze turned cold. Old madam, do you really not care about the many years of friendship? I don't have any friendship with the one surnamed son. The old madam waved her hand fiercely and glared at the second foreign who was about to open her mouth to plead for mercy. Qin Yining nodded and said, Old madam, even if you want to clear your name now, I'm afraid that you won't be able to do so. If you go and plead for mercy for my mother, not only will you not harm yourself, but you will also gain a virtuous reputation. The Empress wants to kill my mother, but as her mother-in-law, you don't have any reaction at all. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by outsiders? What a joke. I'm already so old. Why would I care about what others think? Your father said that you have brains, but why do I see that you're completely muddle-headed? It's good that your mother is dead. In the future, you won't lack women with high positions to call your mother. Madam Chow is better than the one surnamed son in every aspect. Enough! Qin Yining couldn't bear it anymore. She couldn't hit the old madam and had nowhere to vent her anger, so she immediately kicked over a round-back chair by her feet. That round-back chair fell to the ground with a crash and knocked over the small table next to it. The blue and white porcelain lid and teapot on top fell to the ground with a sharp sound of porcelain breaking. Rebellion, rebellion! Someone come quickly. Drag her out, drag her out. No need to trouble yourself. I can leave by myself. Qin Yining coldly said, Old madam is so heartless. Aren't you afraid that others will be sad? Heaven is heartless, but it will always leave a chance for survival. Even if my mother made a mistake, her crime doesn't deserve to die. My father just succeeded in the negotiations and was even conferred the title of Marquis of Anping. Do you think that the emperor will allow my mother to die like this? Even if the empress doesn't care about the outside world's comments, the emperor is still a person who cares about his face. Old madam's fearful appearance is really eye-opening. Qin Yining threw down this sentence and turned to leave. However, her words were like slaps to the old madam's face. Now, she also began to have some doubts. That's right, with the emperor's personality that cherished his reputation, would he allow the empress to kill the Sun clan? Murdering the wife of a meritorious official, if this spread out, it wouldn't be good. However, the emperor had also done a lot of things in the past that involved murdering meritorious officials. The old madam couldn't react for a while. When she came back to her senses, she discovered that Qin Yining had already left the main room. She was suddenly startled and shouted, Someone come! Stop her! With Qin Yining's bad temper, she was afraid that she would go out and cause trouble. Everyone came back to their senses and rushed outside. There were also servants on duty in the courtyard who wanted to stop Qin Yining. However, these people were only domesticated dogs. How could they be a match for a wild wolf? Qin Yining only wanted to save people now. Even if she didn't have enough ability, she wouldn't give up hope at this time. She had to try her best. The people who dared to stop her were all easily knocked down by Qin Yining. The dozen or so servant girls and women didn't manage to stop her. The old madam, second madam, and third madam stood in the corridor with the young ladies and saw Qin Yining's barbaric appearance clearly. Everyone was once again stunned by her skills. The old madam shouted, Quickly, quickly go and catch her. Don't let her go out. Chapter 122. Although it wasn't evening yet, the Fu was already brightly lit. The palace lanterns hung high, making the shadows even darker. The servants outside the second gate all gathered in front of the door when they heard the news. The men were stronger than Qin Yining. The servants and guards also rushed over after hearing the news. However, Qin Yining was the legitimate daughter of Qin Huaiyuan and the legitimate master of the Fu. Even if these people had 100 times the courage, they wouldn't dare to attack the young miss. They could only surround Qin Yining and didn't dare to make a move. At this time, Qin Yining's long, shapely eyebrows were furrowed, and her cherry lips were tightly pursed. She had just fought with the servant girls and older female servants. Now, her hairpin was late, and she was sweating profusely. If she continued to waste time with these people, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand when people from the inner residence chased after her. Get out of the way. Otherwise, I will tell my father that you intend to disrespect me. Fourth young miss, we are just following orders. Old madam said that you are not allowed to go out. The guard had a bitter expression. Qin Yining's expression eased slightly, but her voice was still strict. You dare to meddle in the matters between masters? Aren't you afraid of implicating the family? If you get out of the way, I will explain it to my father. Old madam is old and is only suitable to manage the matters of the inner residence. She can't manage the matters outside. Moreover, don't you know who is the master of this family? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Finally, they hesitantly made way for Qin Yining. Qin Yining saw the time, lifted her skirt, and quickly ran out. At this time, The servant girls and older female servants in the inner residence finally caught up to the door. They were panting as they supported themselves against the wall and panted with their hands on their waists. Their mouths were dry as they pointed in the direction of Qin Yining. For a long time, they couldn't say a word. This fourth young miss was too good at running. They didn't see her use much strength, but she raised her leg and left them far behind. They saw that she had already disappeared. This group of servants from the outer courtyard were still foolishly standing there. The servant girls and older female servants were also very helpless. They could only return to report to Old Madam. When Old Madam heard that Qin Yining had broken out, she was so angry that she lost her temper again. The whole set of blue and white porcelain tea set in the room was smashed until not a single one was left intact. While the Old Madam was throwing a tantrum, Qin Yining had already arrived outside the Fu. He saw Master Zhong, Bing Tang, and Song Lan standing next to a horse carriage at the corner of the street, craning their necks to look in front of the Fu gate. Seeing that Qin Yining had come out, she hurriedly waved at her. Bing Tang lifted her skirt and ran over to support Qin Yining. "Miss, are you all right?" Thanks to Sister Song Lan calling for me, the two of us slipped out while no one was paying attention. Just now, we saw a lot of people rushing towards the second gate. We were worried that Miss wouldn't be able to break out. "Don't worry, they won't dare to touch me." While they were talking, Qin Yining arrived in front of the carriage. "Master Zhong, let's get in the car first. We'll talk on the way." "Yes." Qin Yining smiled gratefully at Master Zhong. He had Bing Tang and Song Lan sit with the driver outside, leaving Master Zhong to talk in the carriage. The carriage quickly rushed in the direction of the Imperial Palace. Inside the carriage, Master Zhong was still a bit reserved. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Master Zhong is an elder, so I'm just talking to the head shopkeeper." The word elder woke Master Zhong up. They were old enough to be grandfather and grandson, not to mention they were master and servant. No one could criticize them. Master Zhong relaxed and said with a serious expression, "I've already sent people to inquire about the matters in the palace. It's true that the eldest madam of the honored Fu had a direct conflict with the empress and was sentenced to death in a fit of anger. She hasn't been executed yet, so she should be locked up somewhere. We need to wait for the emperor's orders." Qin Yining frowned and said, "Is there really such a thing? Does Master have suspicions about this matter?" "At first I did have suspicions. No matter how muddle-headed the emperor is, he still cares about his face. My father just came back from a successful peace negotiation for him. How could he kill the wife of a meritorious official in the blink of an eye?" Master Zhong shook his head and said in a low voice, "Our emperor's actions can't be judged by ordinary people's style. In order to protect himself, the emperor didn't even care about his face. Could it be that he hadn't done enough to harm the loyal and good?" Qin Yining's brows were almost twisted into knots. He said anxiously, "Master Zhong, do we have a way to save my mother's life? Do we have any connections in the palace?" "Master only has to give orders. As long as I have the ability to do it, this old man will not refuse. Moreover, Zhao Yun Agency's connections are Master's connections." Master Zhong smiled when he said this. "Before coming, I heard about the matters in the palace. I guess that Master wouldn't just stand by and do nothing. He would definitely think of a way to save the eldest madam. Therefore, I've already arranged for people to bribe the guards at the gate. When the time comes, we'll get the clothes of the eunuchs and think of a way to sneak in and steal the eldest madam out." Qin Yining looked at Master Zhong's wrinkled but smiling face that was very affectionate and sincere. His nose was sour, and his tears almost flowed down. Master Zhong was an outsider, but he was still able to think of a way for her without caring about his own safety because of her previous efforts. Old Madam had been with her mother for nearly 30 years, but she was still so cold-hearted. The coldness in the Fu was already beyond Qin Yining's imagination. With a comparison, it was easier to see who was close and who was distant, and who was reliable. The carriage was narrow, but Qin Yining still bowed to Master Zhong. "I can't thank you enough for your kindness. Master, you mustn't do this." Master Zhong hurriedly supported him and said, "If it wasn't for Master, my family would have already been taken revenge by those people from Qinglu. My family would have been ruined, and my family would have been destroyed. Perhaps the grass on my grave would have grown a foot tall. How could I still sit here and talk to you? It's not my style to not repay kindness. Master, you don't need to be so polite with me in the future. Qin Yining used his sleeve to wipe the tears from the corners of his eyes and said, Okay, I won't mention it again in the future. What is Master's plan after saving her? If someone is lost in the palace, there will definitely be a thorough investigation. I can only arrange for my mother to escape. As for me, I can't leave. At that time, there will be a separation. Qin Yining was somewhat downcast, but in the blink of an eye, he pulled himself together. But no matter what, as long as I'm alive, there will be a day when we meet again. Master Zhong nodded when he heard this. He admired Qin Yining's tenacity and indomitable character when he was in danger. While they were talking, the carriage had already arrived at Gui Lin Lu, the restaurant closest to the palace under Zhao Yun agency. At this time, there were still many diners in Gui Lin Lu. Qin Yining didn't dare to show his face in public, so he first went to the rear courtyard to wait for news. Who knew that not long after, Master Zhong would come back with even more despairing news with a serious expression. Master, our people just found out that not long after you left Qin Manor, someone from the palace went to pass on a message. The matter with First Madam has become serious. Instead of being sentenced to death with poison wine, it has been changed to being publicly displayed outside the gate at noon tomorrow. Qin Yining's mind exploded when he heard this. The white porcelain cup with a lid fell from her jade-white hands and landed on her legs. The hot tea splashed all over her legs and then fell to the ground with a sharp shattering sound. Miss! Bing Tang and Song Lan hurriedly came forward and checked her skirt for fear that she would be scalded. Fortunately, it was winter and she was wearing thick clothes. Otherwise, if this cup of hot tea splashed on her legs, she would have been scalded. Master Zhong sighed and said, Master, don't be too sad. Qin Yining took a few deep breaths and forced himself to calm down. His voice trembled slightly as he said, Master Zhong, have you heard the reason for this? The method of being sentenced to death with poison wine could be announced as a sudden death to the outside world. It could still be considered as preserving the dignity after death. However, the punishment of being publicly displayed outside the gate at noon didn't even give the person a chance to cover it up. Being publicly displayed was different from beheading. Beheading was just beheading. Being publicly displayed, however, was beheaded and hung the head high on a wooden pole for public display. This was the punishment for great villains. What crime did the Sun Clan commit? Master Zhong said, It said that First Madam insulted His Majesty and called him a fatuous ruler. She said that His Majesty specialized in killing loyal people and that he should have died earlier. Qin Yining covered his forehead. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. No matter how strong she was still a young girl who hadn't reached marriageable age. Even if she had seen the fickleness of human nature, when faced with such a big matter, it was still difficult for her to make a decision. Where's my father? Has my father returned to the Fu? Her father must have a way to save her. Master Zhong shook his head. I haven't heard any news of Grand Preceptor Qin returning to the Fu. Could it be that her father was implicated and locked up? Qin Yining stared straight at the flickering candlelight. He supported his forehead with his hand and was lost in thought. Although Bing Tang and Song Lan were anxious and angry, they didn't dare to speak carelessly and disturb Qin Yining. They could only anxiously stand to the side. After a moment, Qin Yining's gaze became firm. No matter what, I can't watch my mother die. Even if she scolded the incapable ruler and was suspected of disobeying her superiors, it was only because she spoke the truth. The decline of Duke Ding's Fu was unjust. The incapable ruler did this because he was ashamed of being scolded and became angry out of shame. But the more he does this, the more people will scold him. Yes, Madam is right, Master Zhong said in a low voice. But what can you do, boss? No matter what, I have to try my best. However, Master Zhong can't participate in the following matters. You just have to help me ask around in the underworld if there are any brothers in the underworld who are willing to risk their lives for my mother if we offer a large sum of money. I believe that with a large reward, there will be brave men. As long as there is enough money, There should be some chivalrous men who can't stand the incapable ruler's actions. You want to raid the execution ground? Yes. Qin Yining nodded. Master Zhong pondered for a moment and nodded. Our Zhaoyan agency doesn't have much, but we do have connections. I will immediately ask around. Boss, you can rest for now. We will do our best. You don't have to strain yourself too much. Qin Yining said gratefully. You have to be careful this time. Don't get involved and implicate yourself. If there is anything, just push it to me. When the people are hired, you don't have to participate in this matter. Just focus on being the head shopkeeper of Zhaoyan Agency. Miss, what are you saying? I, old Zhong, am not the kind of person who forgets favors. I know the head shopkeeper's character. But you're not alone. You still have a family to take care of. Listen to me. Don't get involved in this matter. Just instruct a few more people and go around to hire people. Master Zhong opened his mouth, but swallowed his words in the end. He nodded heavily and quickly walked out. Bing Tang went to find a dress and helped Qin Yining change into it. Miss, don't worry. Rest for now. No matter what you do tomorrow, you have to conserve your energy to have the strength, right? Qin Yining pursed his lips and nodded. After a while, he said, You can all leave. I want to be alone. P.S. Yining, my mother, how can you say the truth? Pang Xiao. Thinking of little bunny, I'm happy. Chapter 123. It was destined to be a sleepless night. When Qin Yining closed her eyes, she could see the bodies of the members of the Sun Clan. The floor was covered in blood, and the heads were hung high in the wooden cage. The pungent smell of blood seemed to be at the tip of her nose. How could she sleep peacefully? Qin Yining was lost in thought as she stared at the light blue gauze curtain. The candlelight outside the curtain was reflected on the curtain, forming a hazy cross halo. The wind blew the window frame, and the candlelight flickered. She seemed to hear a woman crying. Qin Yining was shocked. She lifted the curtain and stood on the steps. The crying disappeared again. The room was filled with unfamiliar furnishings. It was pitch black in the shadows, as if there was a beast hiding there that could pounce on her at any time and devour her. Qin Yining rubbed her aching forehead and sat on the edge of the bed tiredly. She leaned her head against the bedpost and closed her eyes. With a creak, Bing Tang pushed the door open and came in with a lamp. He asked worriedly, Miss, why are you not asleep? What time is it? It's already Yinzheng. Bing Tang placed the lamp on the table, and the room immediately lit up. The beast hiding in the darkness was also driven away by the light. Miss, you must be so worried that you didn't sleep the whole night, right? How can I sleep after such a big thing happened? Bing Tang put 3 of her fingers on Qin Yining's wrist. After checking her pulse, she said, Miss, there's nothing wrong with your body. I'll prepare some appetizers for you later and drink some water. You'll be fine in 2 days. But do you have any abdominal pain today? Qin Yining nodded. Yes, I do have abdominal pain. My hands and feet are very cold. Miss, you had a cold before. Now that your menstrual period is coming, you will naturally have abdominal pain. But don't worry, I will help you adjust your body in the future. In less than a year, you will be cured. Miss, you have a good body. It will not affect your fertility. Qin Yining was surprised. What are you talking about? When Bing Tang saw that Qin Yining's brows had finally relaxed, he deliberately joked, It's just natural etiquette. It's not a bad thing. We who study medicine have seen through all of this. We're not those fake Taoists. You're so talkative. Qin Yining had almost forgotten that Bing Tang girls were actually the same age as her. Miss, please lie down for a while. This servant will be back soon. Thank you. Qin Yining smiled gratefully. Originally, her mother should have been the one to tell her these things, but she had heard some things from Nanny Jean and Mother Jean. Now, Bing Tang was taking care of her. She was glad that she had Bing Tang and Song Lan to accompany her. If she was alone, she wouldn't know what to do. Not long after, Song Lan and Bing Tang came back together. They helped Qin Yining change her clothes, wash her face, and tidy her up. They also brought over warm rice porridge and a few side dishes to serve her. With warm porridge in her stomach, Qin Yining felt a little better. Her face was no longer as pale as snow. "Boss, are you awake?" Master Zhong's voice came from outside the door. Qin Yining hurriedly went to open the door. "Master Zhong, how did it go?" Master Zhong entered the door. He also looked haggard from not sleeping all night, but there was a smile on his face. "Boss, fortunately, we did not disappoint you. We have already hired 4 skilled people. They promised us that they would definitely rescue the people. I promised them a reward of 5,000 taels of silver each." "That's good. Thank you, Master Zhong." Qin Yining's heart, which had been hanging in the air all night, could finally be at ease. She had been tossing and turning all night. She was afraid that no matter how much money she had, she would not be able to buy manpower. Now that she had manpower, she began to worry that the operation would fail. Song Lan observed Qin Yining's body language and body language. He helped her sit down and said, "Young lady, don't worry. We took them by surprise. Madam will definitely be able to turn misfortune into a blessing. It's still early, and you have already made the necessary arrangements. You have already done everything you can. Please go into the room and rest for a while. Only when you have enough energy will you be able to deal with the matter at noon." Qin Yining understood the principle, but it was difficult to carry out. When Bing Tang saw Qin Yining like this, he couldn't help but think of himself in the past. His nose felt a little sour. Unfortunately, at this time, they, as servants, could only try their best to take care of Qin Yining. There was nothing else they could do. Qin Yining sat like this until 9:15 in the morning. He really couldn't wait any longer, so he ordered Master Zhong to come in. "I'll have to trouble Master Zhong to prepare a carriage for me. Just use the one I usually use." "Boss, are you still planning to go to the execution ground today? Whether it succeeds or not, I want to see the result with my own eyes. If it succeeds, I will return to the Fu and continue to quietly be my family Qin's young lady. If it doesn't," Qin Yining's voice choked up. He forced himself to calm down and said, "If it doesn't succeed, I will also return to being my Grand Preceptor's legitimate daughter." However, no one would be able to stop him from doing what he wanted to do. Master Zhong heard this and sighed as he nodded. Things had happened so suddenly. Qin Yining was able to quickly make arrangements and think of countermeasures. He was also able to calm himself and not act impulsively. He didn't want to implicate the entire family Qin because of worry and resentment. Compared to Qin Yining's actions, the Sun Clan's unprovoked disaster seemed even more foolish. Master Zhong criticized in his heart. However, he didn't want to criticize his boss's mother in front of her. He just did as he was told. Qin Yining dressed neatly. Enduring the pain in his lower abdomen, he boarded the carriage with a pale face and headed toward the Meridian Gate. Grand Preceptor Qin had just succeeded in negotiating peace, and Dian people were still living a peaceful life. However, in the blink of an eye, the Emperor had killed the official's legitimate wife. This news had already spread throughout the capital. Many people had already gone to complain for the Grand Preceptor's wife. However, an imperial edict had decreed her death. Furthermore, the Grand Preceptor's wife had insulted the Emperor with the label of disloyal, who dared to act rashly. Therefore, the people's petitions and pleas for mercy were all useless at this time. When noon arrived, the Sun Clan, dressed in snow-white undergarments and with messy hair, was pushed over by the executioner. Their hands were tied behind their backs, and their mouths were gagged with rags. Seeing them come, the surrounding people were in an uproar. Some people pushed and shoved forward. If it weren't for the warden's office and the Ministry of Justice's people who had already made arrangements and formed a circle to block them, they probably would have rushed inside. Qin Yining brought Bing Tang and Song Lan and stood at the front of the crowd. When they saw the Sun Clan's dirty face, they couldn't help but cry. Qin Yining couldn't hold back his tears and shouted, "Mother!" The young girl's voice was crisp and clear. Coupled with her heartfelt grief, her voice traveled far into the distance. When the people realized that the person next to them was Grand Preceptor Qin's legitimate daughter, they intentionally moved to the side, as if they were afraid of squeezing her. The people around them had already seen Qin Yining's appearance clearly. At this time, everyone couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. No wonder the fatuous ruler ordered Grand Preceptor Qin to bring his legitimate daughter to negotiate. Young Miss Qin was indeed the daughter of wise Panin. However, her family Qin was too tragic. No matter who in Dezhou liked young Miss Qin, Grand Preceptor Qin had sacrificed his daughter for the sake of negotiating peace. In the end, after returning to the country, not only did he encounter an assassination attempt, the fatuous ruler even wanted to kill Grand Preceptor Qin's legitimate wife. This was simply unreasonable and inhumane. The commoners became even more agitated and began to shout at the same time. What crime did Madame Qin commit? Why did she have to be shown to the public? Grand Preceptor Qin has contributed greatly to the country. Shouldn't the emperor show mercy? That's right. For Grand Preceptor Qin's sake, he shouldn't have killed his wife. The Sun Clan's mother was kneeling on the stage. When she saw Qin Yining being stopped by the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing down. As she struggled, she repeatedly shook her head at Qin Yining, as if she had something to say to Qin Yining. However, because her lips were pouted, she couldn't say anything and could only anxiously cry. When Qin Yining saw her mother like this, she couldn't care less about reason. She pushed away the soldiers in front of her and was about to charge forward. However, this was an execution ground after all. No matter how strong Qin Yining was, she was still a woman. She was pulled back by the soldiers and thrown into the crowd, where she fell to the ground. Young Miss Qin, we respect Grand Preceptor Qin. Please reconsider your actions. This is an important execution ground. You can't just barge into it. Qin Yining gritted her teeth and stood up with the help of Bing Tang and Song Lan. There were so many soldiers, but she had only found 4 people. Could she succeed? At this moment, the crowd of onlookers surged again. It was as if someone was pushing and shoving from behind, pushing the people in front a few steps forward. Only then did Qin Yining realize that there were a few tall men around her. These people were dressed like ordinary people. They looked ordinary, but their bodies were very strong. Qin Yining couldn't help but feel puzzled. Could it be that she had hired these people? No, they didn't know who the real employer was. They wouldn't come to her side at all. It's noon. Begin the execution. The executioner shouted loudly. The scene instantly fell silent. The Sun Clan's mother shook her head repeatedly. Snot and tears flowed down her face as she sobbed. The executioner took the prisoner's token and threw it on the ground. Then he raised the ghost head knife high. Qin Yining's heart was in her throat. She looked around for the people she had hired. At the front of the crowd, there were already more than 10 men preparing to rush out. At this critical moment, there was suddenly a sharp sound of something breaking through the air. With a ding sound, the ghost head knife was broken in half by an arrow. The executioner fell to the ground. The arrow didn't slow down at all. It was nailed to the round log that supported the tent behind the executioner. It sank into the log, leaving only the tail of the arrow visible. The executioner turned pale with fright. He shouted in shock, "Who dares to cause trouble? Quickly arrest them." The 10 men who were about to act stopped. "Show this king's flag. Let them see who I am." Hearing the familiar voice, Qin Yining turned around in shock. They saw Peng Xiao, who was wearing a splendid purple python robe and a black mink fur cloak, was sitting upright on a tall and big horse with shiny black fur, leading a dozen or so valiant Tiger Army soldiers. As if they were pushing a mountain and parting the sea, they walked toward the crowd. The common people on both sides of the street immediately dispersed. The red banner with the character swastika and the valiant Tiger Army's black banner with the character swastika were waving arrogantly in the wind. Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Song Lan were protected by a few tall men. They followed the crowd and retreated to the sides, making a path for the sudden arrival of the troops. Peng Xiao urged his horse forward. He held a large bow in his hand. His eyes were filled with arrogance. "What? You dare to kill my mother-in-law right after the peace talks? Go ask your emperor if he still wants to start a war." HM? Chapter 124. Peng Zhao's voice was deep and pleasant to the ears. He didn't seem to be shouting, but his voice still traveled far and wide. His last carried a strong sense of threat, causing everyone present to keep quiet out of fear. The previously noisy Meridian Gate was now very quiet. Only the sound of the banners being blown by the wind could be heard. The commoners retreated in fear, leaving a large, empty space. The men beside Qin Yining seemed to have completed their mission as they disappeared into the crowd. The delicate girl with 2 servant girls stood in front of the commoners, making her seem like a crane in a flock of chickens. Pang Xiao first looked at Qin Yining, then raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. He then looked back at the executioner. The executioner quickly walked over with his subordinates. He asked in a dry and hoarse voice, "Are you de Zhou's Prince Zhongshuan?" As soon as he finished speaking, Pang Xiao lashed out with his horse whip. With a crisp "pa," the tip of the whip landed on the executioner's shoulder, causing him to cry out in pain. "Who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to speak to this king? Call your emperor over." Pang Xiao dismounted from his horse and threw his large bow and horse whip behind him. Huzi hurriedly caught them. The executioner covered his bleeding shoulder and gasped in pain. He hurriedly called for someone to return. Pang Xiao strode towards Qin Yining. When the commoners saw how arrogant he was, they were angry but didn't dare to say anything. They looked at Pang Xiao with suppressed anger in their eyes. Even if their dying emperor was an incapable ruler, it wasn't up to the people of Dezhou to bully them in their territory. However, Pang Xiao seemed to enjoy this kind of gaze. He raised his eyebrows and looked at the executioner. The executioner was so scared that he retreated again and fell to the ground in a panic. He was in such a sorry state that people couldn't bear to look at him. Pang Xiao laughed happily. The commoners also felt that their country's officials were too cowardly and began to discuss in low voices. Pang Xiao walked in front of Qin Yining and took off the sable fur cloak on Qin Yining's shoulders. "Look at how cold you are. You must be frightened, right?" There was a smile in his voice, and his eyes were filled with concern. "Wang Yi, please don't worry about me." Qin Yining raised his hand to take off his cloak, but was stopped by Wang Ye's large hand. "You've only been back for a few days, and you've already become so haggard? Looks like I shouldn't have let you back then. What a good old dog, Yuqi. You even dare to bully this daddy's woman. I can't even bear to lay a finger on her. Yet she's been bullied to this extent after just a few days back in the capital." Qin Yining furrowed his brows and looked up. His eyes met with a wild and murderous look in Qin Yining's eyes. He couldn't help but tremble in fear. He quickly broke free from Qin Yining's grasp and took 2 steps back. He took off the warm cloak that carried his scent and tossed it to Qin Yining. "I don't remember when I was so familiar with Wang Yi. Prince Zhongshuan, please conduct yourself with dignity." After being rejected by her twice in a row, Pang Xiao's expression became cold. He rushed over here because he was afraid that she would be bullied, but she was so good. She was so cold to him and didn't even give him any face. What did she think he was? With his brows tightly knitted and his eyes cold, Pang Xiao suppressed his anger as he glared at Qin Yining. His anger was about to explode. Qin Yining's body tensed up from being stared at like she was being stared at by a wolf. She didn't doubt that Pang Xiao could break her neck at any time, but she couldn't show any weakness at this time. Although she was grateful to Pang Xiao for saving her time and time again, she was also angry at him for speaking such nonsense and taking advantage of her, as well as implicating her in his relationship with him. The emperor was very suspicious. If he accused Qin Huaiyuan of treason, the Qin family would follow in the footsteps of the Sun family. How could she dare to show that she was willing? Moreover, between them, it was Pang Xiao who had always been overbearing and forceful. She pursed her lips and stared at him without backing down. It was like she was staring at a lecher who had offended her. Pang Xiao looked at her small face that was as thin as a palm. She was clearly very weak, but still wanted to challenge him. All of his anger disappeared. He went forward again and put the cloak on Qin Yining's body with a calm face. His large hand tied a bow on the collar as he said through gritted teeth, "If you don't know what's good for you again, this king will immediately take you back." His voice wasn't loud, but everyone around him could clearly hear him. What's more, his purple robe was dazzling under the sunlight. His handsome face was suppressing his anger, and his tall figure was bent slightly to accommodate her height. His large hands, which were used to take people's lives, were now helping this little girl tie her cloak. This scene was too pleasing to the eye, but it was also too strange. The people's discussion became even louder. You! Qin Yining felt like she was being stared at. Her originally pale face became even paler, and her lips trembled. What about you? This king also has a temper. Don't use your beauty to challenge this king's bottom line. What kind of words were these? She was a pure and innocent girl who had never seduced him, but he said this in front of everyone. Even if she jumped into the Yellow River, she wouldn't be able to clear her name. Qin Yining was so angry that her brain was buzzing and her vision turned dark. She couldn't sleep the entire night and was anxious and angry. In addition, she was in a period of unbearable pain. Under these attacks, Qin Yining, who thought that her body was made of iron, suddenly blacked out and fell down. What happened to you? Pang Xiao was startled by her sudden fainting. He hurriedly extended his arms to catch her. He held her in his arms and patted her cold cheeks with his big hand. Then he put his hand on her cold forehead and asked Bing Tang anxiously, "What happened to your miss?" Bing Tang angrily glared at Pang Xiao and scolded in a low voice, "You're so angry that you fainted. You still have a nerve to ask." Pang Xiao lowered his head to look at the person leaning on his shoulder and couldn't help but feel guilty. Her face looked even paler against the black sable and purple robe. Her long eyelashes cast shadows under her eyes. Her entire body was soft and obedient. His heart softened, and he lost his temper. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have been so fierce to her just now. At this moment, the sound of horses and carriages came from not far away. Pang Xiao carefully picked up Qin Yining and placed him on the military carpet laid out on the ground in Huzi. He handed him over to Bing Tang for treatment and turned to look at the people coming with his hands behind his back. The emperor, who was dressed in bright yellow, quickly walked over with the empress, crown prince, and Qin Huaiyun surrounded by palace servants. The commoners were all stunned. They didn't expect that with just one sentence from Wang Yi of Dezhou, their dying emperor would really bring his wife and son over. The commoners were extremely disappointed with the incapable ruler, but they had no choice but to bow and shout, "Long live," 3 times. There was no one else in the emperor's eyes. He only saw the young man with an imposing aura that was like an unsheathed blade. The young man's gaze was like a knife, cutting him until he felt cold all over. The emperor, who had always been tall and valiant, seemed a bit hunched in front of Pang Xiao. "This is your Majesty of Dian? This king greets you." Pang Xiao cupped his hands in greeting. His attitude was extremely perfunctory. The emperor didn't care at all. He smiled and said, "Prince Zhongshuan's fame has spread far and wide. Even this emperor has heard of you in the capital. Seeing you today, the rumors are indeed true. How come Prince Zhongshuan has the time to come to the capital of Dian today?" Pang Xiao sneered and said, "The peace talks were successful, and Zhou and Yin are on good terms. This king originally thought that there would be no need for war in the future, and that the 2 countries would have good relations. Who would have thought that when he entered the capital, he would see such a big show? May I ask if your Majesty of Dian was dissatisfied with the peace talks, so he killed the wife of the official who was in charge of the peace talks in the blink of an eye?" Such arrogant and direct words made the emperor's forehead break out in cold sweat. Small show. Chapter 125. The emperor nervously wiped the cold sweat off his face and forced a smile. "Prince Zhongshuan, what are you talking about? The peace talks are a good thing that both Yin and Zhou are looking forward to. Why would I be dissatisfied? If you are not dissatisfied, why would your Majesty of Dian make such a big scene today? If this king didn't happen to meet you, I'm afraid that your country's imperial tutor's wife would have died. This king doesn't care about how many people your country killed, but you killed the family of the official in charge of the peace talks. This king can't help but think about it. This king is a rough person and can't analyze the twists and turns in this matter. It's inevitable that your Majesty of Dian will make a decision." Pang Xiao was someone who had seen blood on his hands, so his fierce eyes were naturally different. The emperor was used to being flattered and had never seen someone who dared to release killing intent towards him. How could he take it? He was so scared that he was covered in cold sweat and his inner clothes were soaked. His stomach was growling, and he faintly felt like he wanted to go to the toilet. Pang Xiao looked at the emperor's cowardly appearance with disdain and sneered. "How dare you?" Yu Qiyin couldn't take it anymore. He strode forward and said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty is just a prince. How dare you be so arrogant in front of our dying emperor? How can an outsider interfere with the matters of our Yin dynasty?" TSK, the crown prince is full of pride. "You are so aggressive. It seems like it's also your emperor's idea." Pang Xiao crossed his arms and looked down at them condescendingly. "This king is indeed just a prince and can't interfere with your country's methods of killing loyal people. However, this king's tiger army is under the command of this king." Threat. This was a clear threat. Yu Qiyan's white face was red with anger. He wanted to argue, but the emperor slapped him fiercely in the face. "How dare you? I'm still here. Is it your turn to speak?" He turned to Pang Xiao and smiled apologetically. "This is all a misunderstanding. Prince Zhongshuan, please don't mind it." Yu Qiyan covered his face and looked at the emperor in disbelief. His eyes were full of hurt and anger. When the onlookers saw this scene, they were filled with righteous indignation and started whispering to each other. Pang Xiao raised an eyebrow at Yu Qiyan and snorted. The emperor saw that Pang Xiao did not say anything. He had already admitted defeat in public, but the other party was still not willing to give him a way out. Then, he heard the buzz of the common people's voices. He felt as if he had been stripped naked and paraded through the streets. He could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. However, there was nothing he could do about people like Pang Xiao. The empress understood the emperor's intentions. She smiled charmingly and said, "Prince Zhongshuan, you may not know, but what happened today? Get lost. Did this king ask you? And who the hell are you?" The empress widened her eyes in disbelief. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears as she looked at the emperor with grievance. The emperor's expression was already very ugly. He seemed to be explaining, but also reprimanding. "This is my empress, Lady Chao. A hen leads the mourning, but only the rope of the family. Is there no man left in your country? You actually make the harem jump up and down," Pang Xiao said disdainfully. The emperor was so angry that his face turned green. However, he pretended not to care because of fear. Although the onlookers did not like Pang Xiao's arrogant behavior, his words of reprimanding the incapable ruler inexplicably made them feel good. Pang Xiao said all the things that they wanted to say, but did not dare to say. It was really satisfying to see the incapable ruler and the demon empress being angry, but not daring to say anything. The emperor took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He smiled and said, "Actually, what happened today was a test for Minister Qin and his wife. Minister Qin and the Sun clan are deeply in love. Now, the Empress and I are very gratified and feel that their love is very touching. It just so happens that Prince Zhongshuan is also here and can be my witness." The emperor turned around and saw that the Sun clan was still tied up. He angrily reprimanded, "Hurry up and untie Madame Qin." Immediately, someone walked up quickly and removed the rag that was blocking the Sun clan's mouth. Then they cut the rope. Qin Huayuan draped his dark gray cloak over the Sun clan's shoulders. He tidied her hair and sighed. The Sun clan stretched her neck and looked behind Pang Xiao. Seeing that Qin Yining was still unconscious, she was so worried that tears flowed down her face. "Master, Sister Yi, Qin Huayan put his index finger to his lips and made a shushing gesture, indicating for her to speak later. The Sun clan nodded and followed Qin Huayuan to the emperor. They knelt down and bowed. The emperor said with satisfaction, "Grand Preceptor Qin has done a meritorious deed during the peace talks. You and Madame Qin are deeply in love. Today, Grand Preceptor Qin will be conferred the title of Marquis of Anping, which will be hereditary. Madame Qin will be conferred the title of first-rank Madam of Anping. This subject thanks your majesty for your great kindness." Qin Huayuan and the Sun clan kowtowed together. The common people also began to discuss. What exactly was the emperor trying to do? First, he wanted to kill someone else's wife. Then, he said that he wanted to test their relationship. This was simply bullshit. Now, he was afraid of power and little Wang Yi. He was so afraid that he was about to kneel. Then, he hurriedly conferred Qin Huaiyuan the title of Marquis of Anping, which will be hereditary. This sounded like a great favor, but everyone knew that Qin Huaiyuan still didn't have a legitimate son. There were even rumors that Qin Huaiyuan had no hope of having an heir. What hereditary title? Who was he going to give it to? If he really wanted to be praised, he might as well be conferred the title of Duke. The common people were full of criticism and whispered in low voices. The emperor couldn't hear the buzzing discussion clearly, but he also felt that it wasn't anything good. Today's plan had been completely ruined by this boorish man in front of him. Unfortunately, he was the emperor, so he couldn't show any dissatisfaction. The emperor had a belly full of anger that had nowhere to vent, but he still had to put on a smile in front of Pang Xiao. Prince Zhongshuan has arrived. We have already ordered people to set up a banquet. Pang Xiao waved his hand and interrupted the emperor. There's no hurry. Young Miss Qin fainted because she was worried about her mother's life or death. This king is worried. He will only be in a mood to do other things after seeing her get better. The emperor's face turned purple from choking. He didn't dare to do anything, so he could only nod and laugh dryly. Of course, of course. Sure enough, even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. Huh. Pang Xiao was too lazy to pay attention to old dog Yuqi. He turned around to check on Qin Yining's situation. Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan also saluted the emperor and bid him farewell. The emperor gave Qin Huaiyuan a look. Qin Huaiyuan understood and stepped forward. What orders does your majesty have? The emperor said in a low voice. If that evil embryo likes her, you know what to do. Qin Huaiyuan looked at the emperor in shock and said anxiously, Your Majesty, this official plotted to kill Zhao Zhongjing and has a grudge against Prince Zhongshuan. He also pestered this official's daughter in every possible way. Who knows what intentions he has? How can this official send my beloved daughter to the hands of my enemy? You want to defy the imperial decree? The emperor heard Qin Huaiyuan's words and dispelled his suspicion of treason. This official does not dare. Qin Huaiyuan saluted. Only then was the emperor satisfied. He returned to the carriage with the aggrieved empress. Yu Qiyin, who had heard everything clearly, looked at the emperor's back and then looked at Qin Huaiyuan, whose face was filled with worry. Under the discussion of the common people, she only wished that there was a hole in the ground that she could crawl into. Imperial tutor, this official will go back first. Yu Qiyin awkwardly turned around and left. Qin Huaiyuan waited until the emperor, empress, and crown prince had walked far away before he put away his anxious and helpless expression. He stood up straight and calmly stared in the direction of the emperor's departure. At this time, the Sun clan had already run in front of Qin Yining. She held her unconscious daughter in her arms and sobbed, Sister Yi, don't scare mother. I kept shaking my head at you. I wanted to tell you that they didn't really want to kill me, but they blocked my mouth. Sister Yi, wake up. Chapter 126. When Qin Huaiyuan heard the Sun clan's words, he knelt down with a frown and patted her shoulder to comfort her. When the Sun clan saw that it was Qin Huaiyuan, she leaned into his arms and sobbed. When Pang Xiao saw Qin Huaiyuan's expression, she became even more confused. Qin Huaiyuan worriedly asked Bing Tang, Miss Tang, how is Sister Yi? Master, madam, don't worry. Miss is fine. She just fainted because of anger and exhaustion. This servant has already performed acupuncture on Mississippi. She should be fine. Bing Tang held Qin Yining's hand and continuously massaged the acupuncture points on her fingers and the web between her thumb and forefinger. The people from the warden's office in the 5 cities had already evacuated the onlookers. Only Qin Huaiyuan's family and the dozen or so Tiger Army soldiers that Pang Xiao brought were left in front of the Meridian Gate. Just now, there were many people, so they didn't feel it. Now, the wind suddenly blew, making people's faces feel cold. The weather is still cold. Why don't we find a quiet place nearby to settle Miss Qin down so that she won't catch a cold? Pang Xiao thought for a moment and said, I remember that there is a restaurant in Zhao Yin Agency nearby. Bing Tang nodded and said, last night, Miss stayed at Gui Lin Lu Master, madam. Why don't we settle down at Gui Lin Lu for the time being? When Pang Xiao thought about the temperament of the family Qin people, she guessed most of what Qin Yining had experienced. Her heart felt like it was being pinched by someone, and she felt a dull pain. This king has really learned something. The family Qin can't even accommodate a girl. Only then did the Sun clan remember that the one who spoke was the cold-blooded little Wang Yi. When she thought about how close he was to Qin Yining just now, she cried even harder. Qin Huaiyuan frowned and looked at Pang Xiao. Young Miss broke out. In front of Qin Huaiyuan, Bing Tang was not in a position to talk about the people in the main family's mansion. He just said this lightly and helped Qin Yining up with Songlan. They walked to the side of the carriage. The Sun clan also hurried to help. Qin Huaiyuan was a smart man. How could he not understand? When the child was brought back from the mountains, his face was still rosy and full of vitality. But now, he had been tormented to such an extent. Seeing that the Sun clan, Songlan, and Bing Tang worked together to place Qin Yining in the carriage, Qin Huaiyuan sighed softly. He turned around and cupped his hands to Pang Xiao. What's little Wang Ye's plan now? This king will naturally go with you. We'll talk about other things after her condition improves. Qin Huaiyuan frowned when he heard this. He was a man. Naturally, he understood men's thoughts. His daughter was beautiful and had a likable personality. If the person who took a fancy to her was someone else, even if it was someone like the crown prince who was not very useful in politics, Qin Huaiyuan would not feel disgusted. But Pang Xiao was not the same. Pang Xiao's father, the former Beiji Protector General Zhong Zhongjing, died because of his plan to sow discord between them. This official appreciates Prince Zhongshuan's kindness. I also thank Wang Yi on behalf of Sister Yi. However, Sister Yi is an unmarried woman after all. Men and women should be cautious. Besides, the emperor has already prepared a banquet to entertain Wang Yi. Why don't Wang Yi do his business? Pang Xiao sneered. Now her safety is this king's business. Grand Preceptor Qin doesn't need to say anything more. Or does Grand Preceptor Qin want to defy the emperor's decree? Pang Xiao took 2 steps forward. He raised the corner of his lips and said threateningly, This king remembers that your majesty just ordered Grand Preceptor Qin to do something? If Grand Preceptor Qin doesn't listen, this king can only inform your majesty. The atmosphere that could be considered harmonious just a moment ago had now turned into a state of mutual hostility, imminent. The Sun clan, Bing Tang, and Songlan beside the carriage saw this and nervously gathered around. However, they did not dare to say anything. Qin Huaiyuan remained calm in such a frightening atmosphere. After a while, he slowly opened his mouth. Little Wang Yi is a peerless hero. I admire men like Wang Yi the most. Although Wang Ye's hands are stained with blood, he never kills innocent people. Back in Xihua City, Wang Yi refused to massacre the city and was ordered by your majesty to remove him from the position of marshal. Wang Yi would rather resist the edict and risk his life for the sake of innocent people. On behalf of the people of Xihua City, I thank Wang Yi for not killing me. As Qin Huaiyuan spoke, he bowed to Pang Xiao. The tense atmosphere just now had been resolved by his actions. The people around were shocked by Qin Huaiyuan's words. The Sun clan, Bing Tang, and Songlan did not expect that Pang Xiao, who killed without batting an eyelid, was removed from the position of marshal because he did not want to kill the people of Xihua City. Pang Xiao looked at Qin Huaiyuan with a complicated expression. Not only did Qin Huaiyuan sincerely express his gratitude, but he also revealed his background to Pang Xiao. He was telling Pang Xiao that he had spies into Zhou and that the status of spies was not low. What did Qin Huaiyuan want by revealing his trump card like this? Qin Huaiyuan straightened up and said, You and I are both men. The grudges between men should not affect the family. Back then, I schemed against your father and indirectly caused his tragic death. It was because we were in different positions that I had no choice but to do so. Little Wang Yi, if you hate me and want to take revenge, you can come at me. However, as a father, I implore you again, little Wang Yi, not to hurt my daughter. She has led a wandering life since she was young and has suffered a lot. She is truly innocent. In front of the two armies, little Wang Yi was willing to take a risk and do a benevolent and righteous act for someone unrelated to you. Now, little Wang Yi, please let go of the innocent and do not involve Sister Yi in this. After Qin Huayuan finished speaking, he saluted again. Qin Huayuan's sincere words made the Sun clan burst into tears. Bing Tang and Song Lan also had tears in their eyes. Even Huzi and the other hot-blooded men behind Pang Xiao couldn't help but be moved. Although Qin Huayuan was as cunning as a fox and had harmed Wang Ye's father, he was still a person with a true temperament. Pang Xiao, on the other hand, was filled with anger after being moved. So in Grand Preceptor Qin's eyes, this king is such a despicable person? If this king wanted to take revenge, you would have died countless times. Do you really think your life is so tough? I don't think that way. Pang Xiao sneered and took 2 steps forward. He stared at Qin Huayuan with his hawk-like sharp eyes and said without backing down, Grand Preceptor Qin doesn't have the right to decide who this king likes. Qin Huayuan also didn't avoid looking at Pang Xiao. After a moment, he suddenly smiled and nodded. Since that's the case, let's go to Qilin Tower first. As he spoke, he turned around and strode toward the carriage, looking as if he was in a hurry to send his daughter to a place to settle down. Pang Xiao looked at Qin Huayuan's back and sneered. He finally understood where Qin Yining's strength came from. He was so angry that his heart itched, but he couldn't slap her. Her intelligence and wisdom were all inherited from her father. Master, are we going to Qilin Tower? Huzi came forward and asked. Pang Xiao nodded and pulled his beloved horse over. The rest of the tiger army also got on their horses and followed Pang Xiao behind the family Qin's carriage. Huzi then urged his horse closer to Pang Xiao and asked in a low voice, Wang Yi, I just received a secret report from Jinghu Wei. Your Majesty has sent Lian Xingjie as an envoy to Dian. He should arrive in 2 days. If we arrive first, won't the Dian people think that you are pretending to be an envoy? Pang Xiao said indifferently, Let them be. What can they do to me? Huzi could only nod helplessly. His Wang Yi was usually so calm, but he was so abnormal in front of Miss Qin. It was as if all his impulses were used on one person. Chapter 127. Qin Yining felt like a small fish floating in the water. The river water was warm and clear after being bathed by the sun. She threw away all her worries and swam around freely without any worries. She didn't remember who she was or where she was going. After some time, the water became shallower and shallower, and a pair of large hands scooped her up. The person raised the corner of his lips and held her in front of him with clear, almond-shaped eyes. She seemed to hear someone calling her, Xiaoxi, Xiaoxi, little rabbit, little rabbit. Qin Yining suddenly became angry. Her name was Xiaoxi, but she was now Qin Yining, who was Little Rabbit. The sudden anger made all the memories come back to her. Thinking of her mother on the execution ground, Qin Yining suddenly opened her eyes and sat up in shock. Mother! Miss, you're awake? Sister Yi, do you feel better? Qin Yining looked at her mother, who was sitting by the bed and holding her hand, and her father, who was looking at her with concern. Then she looked at the unfamiliar room. Before she could react to the situation in front of her, the Sun clan had already hugged her. Sister Yi, you're finally awake. Do you know that you've been unconscious for an entire day? Mother? Qin Yining slowly raised her arms and hugged the Sun clan. She felt that she must be dreaming. Her mother was cold to her most of the time. When had she ever been so gentle to her? Qin Yining leaned her face against the Sun clan's shoulder. If this was a dream, then let this dream be a little longer. Qin Huayuan and Pang Xiao, who were watching from the side, felt sad for her. She was so careful and cherishing that she couldn't believe it. Pang Xiao frowned and wondered how much the Sun clan's mother had mistreated this silly girl. Qin Huayuan couldn't help but stroke her head with his large hand. Qin Yining felt that something was wrong. How could the touch in a dream be so clear? Her mother's embrace was so warm that the few drops of warm tears that fell on her neck had already turned cold. Her father's hand that touched her forehead was warm and real. There were also Pang Xiao, Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Huzi, who were smiling at him. She came back to her senses and said in surprise, "Mother, you're fine." "It's okay, it's okay." The Sun Clan member touched Qin Yining's cheek. "Do you feel better?" "I'm fine. Jiraiya is fine." "That's good. I was scared to death when I saw you faint." "Mother, you scared me. I thought I would never see you again," Qin Yining said as tears welled up in his eyes. However, she forced a smile and didn't let her tears fall down. She looked at Qin Huayuan and said, "Father must have come to save Mother. Otherwise, if the executioner wanted to kill the criminal, even if Pang Xiao was there, he would still do it." Qin Huayuan said with shame, "It was little Wang Yi who saved your mother. Father had been in the palace with the emperor and didn't have a chance to come out. It was only later that the emperor heard that little Wang Yi came in person that he brought father here." Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao in surprise. She remembered. Pang Xiao arrogantly told the executioner to call the emperor. With the temperament of an incapable emperor, wouldn't he be scared to the point of peeing his pants when he saw Pang Xiao? Naturally, whatever Pang Xiao said was the truth. So, it was really Pang Xiao who saved the Sun Clan? In addition, Pang Xiao saved her mother, and her grandmother's lives in the fairy temple, protected her in Xihua City, and saved the Sun Clan on the execution field. He had saved her 3 times. Qin Yining lifted the quilt and got up. She knelt down in front of Pang Xiao and was about to kowtow. Her face was as white as snow, and her body was weak. How could Pang Xiao be willing to let her bow? He hurriedly reached out to help her. "What are you doing? Get up." Qin Yining refused to get up, but she couldn't kowtow because he was holding her arm. She could only look up at him gratefully. "Wang Yi has saved me many times. This time, you saved my mother's life. I have nothing to repay you with. In the future, if Wang Yi has any orders, just say it. This little girl will go through water and tread on fire, and will not hesitate to die 10,000 times. Who wants you to die 10,000 times?" Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining's beautiful face up close. His ears turned red, and he used a little strength to help her up. "Miss Qin, you don't have to do this." This king was just doing it in passing. Huzi's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he heard this. He was clearly living well in the fairy temple, but after receiving Jinghu Wei's secret report, he rushed over as fast as he could. He didn't know how to take advantage of the situation in front of the main character, but he still talked about in passing. How could he please the beauty like this? He was anxious to death. How can there be such an easy thing in the world? Qin Yining laughed. Wang Ye's identity is special. It's not easy for him to move around in the Dian. I'm not someone who doesn't know what's good for him. Although Wang Ye's words sometimes are a little unorthodox, I've seen what Wang Yi has done. I said I'll repay you, so I'll definitely repay you. Pang Xiao heard this, and his appreciation of her increased another level. He knew she was an understanding person. As expected, she didn't disappoint him. She was always smart enough to look past the surface and see the essence of things. Although she didn't like the words he said, she wouldn't erase what he had done for her. Pang Xiao waved his hand. "Miss Qin, don't take it to heart. Since you're fine, this king will leave." Qin Yining thought he must have something to do, so he curtsied. "Wang Yi, take care." Pang Xiao looked at him deeply before leaving with Huzi. Qin Huayuan stood up to send them off. Qin Yining took the Sun Clan's hand and said, "Mother, you've suffered. When I came home, I didn't find you in the Fu. I heard you went to the palace with Madame Chow. Did they treat you badly?" "No one treated me badly when I lived in the palace, but I was very nervous when facing people like the Empress." Qin Yining nodded and asked, "Why did you offend the Empress and the Emperor that day?" The Sun Clan was stunned by the question and said in surprise, "When did I offend the Emperor and the Empress?" Qin Yining saw the Sun Clan's appearance and felt even more confused. She had her doubts when the Sun clan was sitting in front of her. Madame Sun was not a bold person. She had almost been killed just now. She should have been frightened and weak at this moment. Why did it look like she was fine? Mother didn't offend the Emperor and the Empress. But I heard outside that the Empress wanted to bestow the Emperor's 2 concubines to Father as concubines. You didn't agree and argued with the Empress in the palace. You insulted the Empress and were sentenced to death. Later, the Emperor came to persuade you, but you scolded the Emperor as a fatuous ruler. The Emperor was angry and sentenced you to be publicly displayed. The Sun clan's face turned pale, and she shook her head. Do you think I'm crazy? No matter how big the hatred is, I know the severity of the matter. How could I have the courage to call the Emperor a fatuous ruler? It's even more impossible for me to argue with the Empress, because she wanted to bestow concubines to me. I'm not a jealous woman. Fine, although I don't like your father taking concubines, I definitely won't forbid him from taking concubines. Why would I argue with the Empress? So, you didn't do it? Then how did you get escorted to the execution ground? The Sun clan shook her head and said, I'm confused. I was resting in the palace when a mama called me out. That mama only said that she didn't really want to kill me and didn't explain. Then she gagged me, tied me up, and escorted me to the Meridian Gate. As soon as the Sun clan's voice fell, the sound of the door creaking could be heard. Qin Huaiyuan slowly walked in. Qin Yining looked at Qin Huaiyuan in confusion. Qin Yining believed the Sun clan's words. The Sun clan wasn't a very scheming person, and they wouldn't lie about this kind of thing. Then, how could a palace servant dare to dig up an official's wife, who was just staying in the palace for a short time, gagged her, and escorted her to the execution ground? Although the imperial family was dignified, if they didn't explain this kind of thing to his father, how could his father not complain at all? The emperor could indeed destroy the family Qin with a raise of his hand. But Qin Yining also believed that his father wasn't a soft persimmon that could be easily crushed. So, there was only one conclusion. His father knew about this matter. Father? Qin Yining asked in confusion. Do you know what happened? Qin Huayan sat down in a round chair near the window. He lowered his eyes and played with the bowl in his hand. He sighed and said, I don't know the details. The emperor had me stay in the imperial study and said that he wanted to chat with me. He didn't let me go back. As for what happened at the execution ground, I didn't know until I arrived. So, the so-called palace banquet didn't start? Qin Huaiyuan shook his head and lowered his eyes, not looking at Qin Yining. Qin Yining frowned and pondered. The emperor used the family Qin to set up a trap. But why did the emperor do this? Everything was going well, but he kidnapped his mother and escorted her to the execution ground. He even threatened to show her to the public. At first glance, it was obvious that he set up a big trap and wanted to test someone. When Qin Yining thought of this, he was suddenly shocked. The emperor didn't really want to kill his mother. If the people she arranged really went to the execution ground, what would happen? The emperor must have secretly sent more people. She only found 4 people, and it was uncertain whether she could successfully escape. If these 4 people were arrested and the emperor's people found out that she was the mastermind, then the entire family Qin might. Qin Yining was so scared that his back was covered in cold sweat. At this moment, she was extremely grateful to Pang Xiao for arriving in time and messing up the situation. Otherwise, she was afraid that her impulsive actions this time would have really caused a disaster for the family Qin. And her father. Qin Yining looked at his father in horror and muttered, Father, after your peace talk, did the emperor's attitude toward you change? Shouldn't we restrain ourselves? The emperor's actions this time might be to test Qin Huaiyuan. Perhaps he suspected that Qin Huaiyuan had the intention to betray the country. Qin Huaiyuan looked at Qin Yining with a complicated expression. There were some things that he couldn't tell her and the Sun clan, so he could only let Qin Yining guess on his own. Qin Huaiyuan felt sorry for Qin Yining and the Sun clan, but he was afraid that some things would cause even more trouble if he told them. He could only sigh softly and say, Sister Yi, you don't have to worry. Father will take care of these things. Now that you're awake and we've returned to the capital, I haven't returned home yet. Why don't we pack up and return home? Qin Yining knew that Qin Huaiyuan must have his own difficulties, so he didn't pursue the matter. Thinking of the Dowager Duchess's face, Qin Yining shook his head and said, "Father, you can return home first. However, I won't go back with my mother so easily." Qin Huaiyuan was stunned and asked in confusion, "Sister Yi, what do you mean?" Qin Yining smiled, but his smile was uglier than crying. Chapter 128. Qin Huaiyuan looked deeply at Qin Yining, as if he was scrutinizing something. The aura he inadvertently revealed made people feel pressured. The Sun Clan's heart trembled. She turned her head and said worriedly, "Sister Yi, why don't we listen to your father? We'll go back with him. I've been living in the palace for a while, so I can go back and pay respects to the old madam." Qin Yining looked at the Sun Clan with pity. Her mother had been in the palace for many days, so she didn't know about the old madam's heartlessness. She treated the old madam as her mother-in-law, but the old madam only treated her as an outsider. The old madam was selfish and heartless to the extreme. However, Qin Yining didn't want to tell the Sun Clan about this. The Sun Clan wasn't good at enduring. In the future, she would have to return to the Fu to live. If the Sun Clan knew everything, how could she face the old madam calmly? Therefore, Qin Yining only shook her head. "I hope father and mother can forgive your daughter's willfulness. It's not that I don't respect the old madam, but in order to not be bullied in the Fu in the future, I can only do this." Seeing that Qin Yining restrained herself and didn't tell the Sun Clan about the Fu, Qin Huaiyuan could vaguely guess a thing or two. "Father understands. You and your mother can stay here for the time being." Qin Huaiyuan sighed and stood up, saying, "Father will investigate when I return to the Fu." "Thank you, Father." Qin Yining smiled gratefully. The dimples on her cheeks were very cute and lovable. Qin Huaiyuan couldn't help but smile. "You and your mother should take good care of yourselves." "Master." The Sun Clan glanced at Qin Yining helplessly, then stood up to send Qin Huaiyuan off. "I'll persuade Sister Yi. I'll go back soon." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and nodded. "Sister Yi has her own ideas. You can take good care of her." The Sun Clan sent Qin Huaiyuan off before returning to their room. Qin Yining had already ordered the servants to prepare exquisite and delicious side dishes. After having a simple dinner with the Sun Clan, he went to bed with the Sun Clan after washing up. The mother and daughter chatted casually. Qin Yining only talked about some interesting things that happened during the peace talks and did not mention anything about the mansion. It was rare for her to be so close to the Sun Clan. Now that she was able to speak with her mother in such a peaceful manner, she felt extremely happy. She had been praying for this day ever since she returned to the residence. The joy of Qin Yining infected the Sun Clan, and the Sun Clan also relaxed. However, he still had doubts in his heart. What did old Madame do to make Sister Yi refuse to return to the Fu? Percent Xixiao Garden was brightly lit. Brand new and bright palace lanterns hung high under the eaves of the corridors. The blue brick floor that had just been drenched by a drizzle reflected the palace lanterns and the silhouette of the house, making the spacious courtyard look like a celestial palace. Qin Huaiyuan wore a cloak, and Mammy Qin led the way with a lantern in front. Behind them, two maidservants opened oil paper umbrellas and raised their hands to shield him from the drizzle. The group of people walked quickly to the main room. Mammy Qin smiled and said, "It's good that Leoi has returned safely. Old Madam will be very happy." Qin Huaiyuan smiled calmly and didn't say anything. Seeing Qin Huaiyuan's expression and the fact that he came back alone, Mammy Qin knew to change the topic. "The weather is getting warmer. It started to drizzle in the capital 2 days ago. There's already some greenery in our back garden." "That's right." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "In the blink of an eye, the spring sun has arrived." After passing through the courtyard and going up the steps, Rui curtsied and carefully lifted the dark green bamboo curtain embroidered with magpies ascending to the branches for Qin Huaiyuan. The warmth and laughter in the room came out together, but Qin Huaiyuan didn't reveal a trace of a smile. Rui still wanted to enter the room to serve, but Mammy Qin pulled her and said, "Go tell the small kitchen to prepare eldest Leoi's favorite food first." Rui nodded and smiled gratefully at Mammy Chin before quickly leaving. Mammy Chin stood in the corridor and didn't enter the room. Not to mention that she didn't enter the room, even the other people in the room would come out later. It was better for her not to join in the fun. Qin Huayuan directly entered the room and saw Chao Yuqing, Qin Huaning, and the sixth young miss surrounding the old madam. They were either standing or sitting and chatting with her. Seeing her return, Chao Yuqing, Qin Huaning, and the sixth young miss all stood up and bowed. The old madam happily got off the Arhut bed and grabbed Qin Huayuan's hand. Mengub is back. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Qin Huayuan bowed to the old madam and then sized her up. Seeing that the old madam's complexion was rosy and her complexion was normal, he said, "Mother, how have you been?" "Good, good. I was just worried about you. Look, you've lost a lot of weight after going out. Let's go back and make up for it." She then smiled at Chao Yuqing. "Just now, Yuqing and I were talking about what your favorite food is." Yuqing also said that the weather is getting warm, so she should prepare summer clothes for you. Because it was time-consuming to make clothes, the Fu's clothes had to be prepared every other season. Qin Huayuan faintly glanced at Chao Yuqing and said, "You don't need to worry. Eldest madam will take care of this matter." This was to remind Chao Yuqing that she was only a concubine and shouldn't exceed her authority. Hearing this, Chao Yuqing's smile faded and her pink face turned white, but she still maintained her smile. It's not troublesome. Doing these things was originally this concubine's duty. Duty? Qin Huayuan helped the old madam sit down on the mahogany Arhut bed with a brand new light blue bedding. He chuckled softly. "I thought that your duties were in the palace and not in the manor." Chao Yuqing's complexion had already turned from white to red. Her beautiful eyes angrily looked at Qin Huayuan, as if she didn't understand why Qin Huayuan suddenly gave her food. But in just a breath, she humbly and respectfully bowed. "Laoi, please calm down." When the old madam saw that her son actually dared to treat Chao Shi like this, she was so anxious that her face turned white. This was Chao Shi, Empress Chao's older sister, the eldest daughter of the father-in-law of Chao. She repeatedly signaled Qin Huayuan with her eyes, but Qin Huayuan seemed to not see it and could still sit down leisurely to drink tea. The old madam felt stifled and could only personally help Chao Yuqing to sit down on the embroidered stool at the side. "Good child, don't mind him. He's being muddle-headed. I'll talk to him." Just as she finished speaking, Qin Huayuan spoke first. "You all leave first. I have something to say to the old madam." Qin Huaning and six Xiaojia, who were silent like cicadas in winter, hurriedly bowed and left as if they had been pardoned. Chao Yuqing hesitantly glanced at Qin Huayuan and stood to leave. Soon, there was no one else in the room. The old madam looked at Chao Shi's aggrieved appearance and said anxiously, "Mengguber, what are you doing? You just came back, and you already gave Yuqing a look." "A look? She's this son's concubine. She did something like deceiving the mistress into the palace. This son hasn't directly taught her a lesson and only said a few words indirectly. Can I say anything? Don't forget, her surname is Chao. Her surname is Qin now." The old madam pointed at Qin Huayuan and said, "You scoundrel child, don't forget what kind of people her younger sister and father are. If you don't deal with these two people, what will you do in the future?" This son knows that mother is worried about this son and dotes on this son. Qin Huayuan helped the old madam to sit down again and refilled the old madam's tea. "However, mother, please understand that this son is also a husband and a father." Qin Huayuan didn't say much. The old madam's expression changed a few times, and she angrily cursed. "I just knew that it must be that slut from the Sun clan and that little bastard Qin Ening who instigated it behind the scenes. What did they say about me?" The more she thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. The old madam choked with sobs. The Sun clan dared to provoke the imperial power, and that precious daughter of yours actually went to save them. That kind of unruly and stupid woman, it's good that she's dead. She won't implicate you. I'm your mother, the old mistress of this family. Could it be that I can let a stinky fish from the Sun clan stir up a pot of soup? Mother, please calm down. Qin Huayuan lowered his head and said, Mother's love for this son is the same as this son's love for Sister E. Mother probably forgot that when grandmother made things difficult for you in every way possible, and when father favored the concubine and neglected the wife, raising that Jiang clan up high, how you wash your face with tears and how your son did it. When the old madam heard this, she was angry, but it also evoked the sadness of her youth. She recalled how Qin Huayuan protected her when she was young. What mother hated the most in the past was grandmother's unkindness and short-sightedness. But now, look at yourself. What's the difference between you and grandmother? You unfilial son, didn't I do all this for you? For this son, then mother, please take good care of this son's reputation. This son can't bear the reputation of being ungrateful and spoiling the concubine while neglecting the wife. This son has already reached the top of the court, and now I have a noble title. With the fate of the Dayan nation, this son has already reached the peak. There's no more hope for this son. This son has always been upright and upright. I only hope that no one will criticize and insult me. This son begs mother not to make decisions on your own. Good, good. You think I'm unnecessary. Mother knows what I'm talking about. Why do you have to change the topic? Qin Huayuan looked straight at the old madam and said, Sister E and the Sun clan are temporarily living outside. This son doesn't care. Mother, do as you see fit. As for Chao clan, mother doesn't know the inside story between this son and her. Please don't interfere. After Qin Huayuan finished speaking, he bowed and turned to leave. Looking at his back, the old madam's tears streamed down. This unfilial son, what kind of sin have I committed? In the corridor, Mammy Qin, Ji Xiang, and Ru Yi bowed to Qin Huayuan and ordered someone to hold an umbrella for Qin Huayuan to send him off. Mammy Qin took a breath of the cold, damp air, patted her cheeks, and adjusted her expression. Only then did she enter the room to comfort the old madam. Although Qin Huayuan and the old madam had dismissed the bystanders, there was no wall that didn't have a crack. Soon the second branch and the third branch learned of the news. The second madam and the third madam had long been displeased with the old madam's fawning. When they heard the news, they couldn't help but rejoice in her misfortune, regardless of how the people in the Fu secretly discussed it. At this time, in the welcoming pavilion of the Honglu Temple, the official of the Honglu Temple was leading de Zhou's envoy to the main hall. The Lian Xingjie was dressed in casual clothes, and his back was straight. The official of the Honglu Temple said in fear and trepidation, Your country's Prince Zhongshuan has arrived before you. At this time, he is waiting for you in the reception pavilion for a banquet. This official has prepared an exquisite banquet and our country's unique songs and dances. I hope that you won't dislike them. When he heard that Pang Xiao was also present, Lian Xingjie couldn't help but reveal a trace of fear on his face. However, when he thought about your Majesty's decree, his heart became firm again. The unique songs and dances mentioned by the official of the Honglu Temple made Lian Xingjie's heart ripple. There would be songs and dances. These people wouldn't be rough men, right? He also wouldn't have to worry about being lonely at night. Just as he was thinking, a group of people entered the reception pavilion. Chapter 129. Who else could it be if not this official? Lian Xingjie's answer was full of confidence, but if one listened carefully, one could see how dry his voice was. Pang Xiao cast a sidelong glance at his outwardly fierce face and sneered, then ignored him. His slender fingers with distinct joints picked up an exquisite white porcelain wine cup with gold. Immediately, a beautiful female servant with a smile like a flower poured wine for him, with a copper pot in hand. The amber wine fell into the wine cup. The color was sparkling and translucent, and the aroma was rich. The female servant's red lips curled slightly. Her gaze carefully lingered on Pang Xiao's handsome face. Her cheeks immediately blushed, and she shyly lowered her eyes. This scene made Lian Xingjie feel envious. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva and quickly walked forward a few steps. Pang Xiao didn't care at all. He raised his head and drank the wine in one gulp. His Adam's apple moved, and the strong curve of his jaw added a bit of casual and domineering aura to him. The female servant's cheeks became redder. She prepared to pour more wine, but Pang Xiao used his slender fingers to turn the wine cup upside down. He waved his hand to indicate for the servant to withdraw. He cast a sidelong glance at Lien Xingjie and lazily said, "Official Lien must have received your majesty's decree. Otherwise, you wouldn't have grown so bold and not saluted when you see this king." Lien Xingjie finally moved his gaze away from the beautiful woman. When he met Pang Zhao's mocking and sharp eyes, his body trembled and he almost knelt down. Cough, this official came by imperial decree. Unlike some people who came without permission, Lien Xingjie said with extreme apprehension. He was really scared after being beaten. When he saw Pang Xiao, his entire body tensed up, and the places on his back that had been beaten began to ache. Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows and smiled. He casually pointed to an empty seat. "Sit. Why stand when you speak? This king didn't punish you to stand." Lien Xingjie's face turned red. He was angry, and his timidity decreased a little. He straightened his neck and sat down opposite Pang Xiao. Seeing that the two people from Dezhou didn't seem to get along, the minister of Honglu was so nervous that his palms were sweating. He was afraid that the two would fight because of a disagreement. If something like this happened under his watch, the emperor would definitely be angry. Seeing that Lien Xingjie had taken his seat and was no longer speaking, the minister of the Chamberlain of Dependencies let out a sigh of relief. He ordered the several officials accompanying him to take their seats as well, and then ordered the banquet to begin with singing and dancing. The elegant sound of the wind instruments was melodious and pleasing to the ears. The young dancers were dressed in gauze, and their movements were graceful and graceful. In the magnificent flower hall, there was a bit of ethereal beauty. In addition, there was a table for 8 with red brocade and peony flowers on it, and there was a jade plate of delicacies and fine wine on it. Lien Xingjie ate delicacies and fine wine, and had beauties serving him. His gaze was fixed on the dancing young girls, and he felt both physically and mentally comfortable. His tense mood instantly relaxed. Pang Xiao cast a sidelong glance at Lien Xingjie's foolish appearance. He took the wine pot from the female servant's hand and poured himself a drink. His eyes that were admiring the singing and dancing were extremely cold. It was as if he didn't see this beautiful scene in the slightest. When the minister of Honglu and the other Dian officials saw the completely opposite attitudes of Pang Xiao and Lien Xingjie, they each had their own guesses. They didn't dare to participate in the battle between the two and only silently accompanied them. After 3 rounds of wine, Lien Xingjie was completely relaxed. His mood also rose because of the wine. "Prince Zhongshuan, you came to Dian without permission. What is the punishment for this?" The originally imposing words were spoken with a heavy stutter after he was drunk, and he didn't have any confidence. Pang Xiao lazily said, "The two countries have successfully negotiated peace and become friendly neighbors. This king is just traveling around. What crime is there? You are twisting words and forcing logic. You are the commander of the Tiger Army. Don't you know the importance of your position? Your Majesty didn't allow you to travel, but you decided on your own. Do you know that you have angered your Majesty?" Lien Xingjie was drunk and slammed the table angrily. The singing and dancing suddenly stopped. Everyone was frightened by Lien Xingjie's sudden anger and kept quiet out of fear. The minister of Honglu didn't dare to participate in Dezhou's matter. He quickly got up and waved his hand to lead everyone away. The scene that was singing and dancing a moment ago was now strangely quiet. Pang Xiao drank a mouthful of wine and was too lazy to speak. Lien Xingjie saw that Pang Xiao didn't speak and sneered. "If you don't speak, it means that you are afraid. Let me tell you, Pang Zhishi, I have seen that you have been rampant for a long time. You have always been disrespectful to us, the old officials of Beiji. We have been loyal to your Majesty, but you have been picking on us and beating and scolding us. Fortunately, His Majesty is wise and has seen through your domineering nature." Pang Xiao dug his ears. "Are you done?" His Majesty asked this official to ask you why you didn't return to the capital and came to dine instead. Why aren't you answering? When a general is outside, he is not subject to military orders. Pang Xiao put down the wine jug. The bottom of the brass jug lightly touched the table, making a talk sound. Besides, this king has his own reasons for this king. Lian Xingjie saw that Pang Xiao didn't explode and scold him like before. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. So what if he has the Tiger Army's Tiger Tally? So what if the 100,000 Tiger Army is brave and good at fighting and can fight 1 against 10? Even if Pang Xiao is a king, he still has to bow down to your majesty. He is also afraid of the old officials of Beiji and the north settling Marquis Ji Ziyu's Dragon Stallion Army. Not to mention that the Dragon Stallion Army has sufficient military strength. Years ago, when the Great Zhou dynasty conquered the lands of northern Ji, Pang Xiao led the brave Tiger Army and slaughtered the vanguard. Even though the officials had already surrendered, Pang Xiao still dragged them out and fed them to the dogs. His viciousness had already made the old officials of northern Ji fearful. These people have now submitted to the Zhou. In their hearts, Pang Xiao was the culprit that caused the destruction of Beiji. How could they not hate Pang Xiao? Moreover, your majesty is afraid of Pang Xiao's military strength. Ji Ziyu's Dragon Stallion Army is growing stronger day by day. It is a sharp weapon that keeps the Tiger Army in check. However, Pang Xiao doesn't know how to restrain himself. He is still arrogant and makes a scene at every turn. Lian Xingjie, as an official of Beiji who surrendered to the Zhou, has already disliked Pang Xiao for many days. Now that he saw that Pang Xiao only said, when a general is in a foreign country, he will not obey orders, he was so proud that he was about to float. You have been proud for too long. Lian Xingjie laughed and said, Old brother, let me give you a piece of advice. Restrain yourself. Now that you have explained to me properly, I can also put in a few good words for you in the letter to your majesty. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't even know how you died. Moreover, it is not me who wants to ask why you came to die. It is your majesty who wants to ask. As Lian Xingjie spoke, he stood up with his arms on the square table. He leaned over and pretended to listen, but his face was full of mockery. Come. Tell me about it first. Pang Xiao kept smiling with his eyes down and played with the golden wine cup in his hand. Huzi, who was beside him, was so angry at Lian Xingjie's proud face that his face turned purple. He wanted to rush up and break Lian Xingjie's neck. Lian Xingjie saw that Pang Xiao still didn't speak. He leaned forward and smiled proudly. Why aren't you talking? You said that you have your reasons. Why don't you tell me your reasons? Pa! A crisp sound. Lian Xingjie covered his swollen face in disbelief and looked dazedly at Pang Xiao. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to listen to this king? Pang Xiao stood up and looked down at Lian Xingjie's pale face. Lian Xingjie was woken up by the slap. Recalling his mocking words, he covered his face and took a few steps back as if he could escape Pang Xiao's attack range. Pang Xiao was too lazy to pay attention to him. He turned around and left the flower pavilion with Huzi. Lian Xingjie covered his face and stared at Pang Xiao's back. He roared fiercely, Don't be so arrogant. Sooner or later, you will cry. The scene in the room had been seen clearly by the officials of the Honglu Temple who were peeping through the crack in the door. They quietly went to report it to the emperor. The emperor was hugging the empress and sitting on the Arhut bed with bright yellow bedding by the window of the imperial study. Hearing the Honglu Temple official's words, the empress smiled charmingly. It seems that Prince Zhongshuin is nothing more than this. The emperor had had enough of Pang Xiao's domineering attitude. He patted the empress's butt and whispered a few words in her ear. The empress continued to act coquettishly for a while. Seeing that the emperor really wanted her to leave, she reluctantly left the imperial study. The emperor smiled as he watched the empress walk away. Only then did his expression become serious. He stood up and said, So, Emperor Zhou is afraid of Pang Zhishi. This humble subject thinks so too. Otherwise, with Meng Zhi's domineering nature, he definitely wouldn't tolerate Sir Envoy's repeated questioning. Tisk! Jin knew that this kind of arrogant person wouldn't have a long life, even if he was rich. How could he allow others to sleep beside him? Emperor Zhou probably couldn't stand his actions and wanted to suppress him. Otherwise, how could that Lien person dare to be so bold in front of Pang Zhishi? Your Majesty is wise. The Honglu Temple official nodded. The emperor waved his hand and dismissed the Honglu Temple official. When there was no one around, the emperor sat behind the black wooden desk with a gloomy expression. Thinking back to how his polite greetings to Pang Zhishi were seen by so many commoners and officials, the emperor felt regret. Who knew that Pang Zhishi's position in Zhou had already been shaken? If he had known, he would have been more unyielding. Even Pang Zhishi couldn't control Emperor Zhou's thoughts. He actually believed Pang Zhishi's threat of war? What a mistake! What a mistake! In a fit of anger, the emperor swept the brush, ink, and paper on the table to the ground. When the guards and eunuchs outside heard the commotion, they frantically rushed in to protect the emperor. Seeing that the emperor had lost his temper, they were slightly relieved. However, they all kept quiet out of fear and didn't dare to go close to persuade him. The emperor's temper had become more and more irritable recently. He often couldn't control himself when he was angry. Last time, the eunuch who was in charge of writing only said a few words of advice and was dragged out to be beaten 20 times. If it wasn't for the eunuch who was in charge of writing and his connections, how could he still be alive now? When the emperor smashed everything that could be smashed, he let out a sigh of relief. Bring me the elixir that immortal Lu offered. Yes. The eunuch immediately went to fetch an exquisite golden box and presented a jet-black elixir with both hands. The emperor swallowed it with cold wine and immediately felt his entire body relax. He was in a good mood. He laughed and said, "The Empress recommended immortal Lu very well. Tell the Empress to reward her according to her discretion. Take whatever she needs from my treasury." "Yes, this servant will go now." The eunuch smiled apologetically and bowed. In a low voice, he instructed the eunuchs to quietly clean up the mess on the ground. The emperor thought for a moment and said, "Also, go early tomorrow morning and announce that my grace to the family Qin is not fake. Now that the Sun clan has become a first-rank noble lady, they should be rewarded. I will write a plaque for the family Qin tomorrow. Send it to someone to make it. Also, set up a memorial arch for the Sun clan in front of the family Qin. After you send the reward tomorrow morning, make a trip to the family Qin and inform them." Chapter 130. The emperor personally wrote the words Onping Marquis Mansion, together with the gift of building the memorial archway for Onping Madam, gold, silver, and jewelry. The next afternoon, the head eunuch personally led people to deliver it to the family Qin. When the old madam received the news, she was eating a cup of almond milk. When she heard the news, she was so happy that she couldn't hold the white porcelain cup and spilled half of the milk. Quickly, set up the incense table and call the womenfolk of the family to hurry to the front to receive the decree. She turned around and ordered Mammy Qin to help her put on makeup. The jubilant atmosphere of the Qin mansion spread from the backyard to the front yard. The head eunuch was used to changing the helm according to the wind, so he politely delivered the decree and rewards. Seeing that the Sun clan and Qin Ening weren't at home, he asked a question. "Old Qin, why haven't I seen Onping Madam and your family's fourth miss today?" The old madam was stunned and said with a smile, "Thank you for asking. Onping Madam isn't feeling well and needs to recuperate. Coincidentally, my fourth granddaughter has a property outside. She said that it was the most suitable place for recuperating, so she went to serve her mother. Since you came to give the rewards, I didn't have time to bring them back because I was in a hurry." Although the head eunuch was smart and saw the old madam's embarrassment, he didn't dare to offend Qin Huaiyuan and didn't dare to ask the old madam. "Since that's the case, I ask old Qin to order people to lead the way. The memorial archway can be ordered, but some of the rewards from the emperor and empress were ordered to be given to Onping Madam and fourth miss in person." The old madam hurriedly agreed and looked at Qin Huaiyuan inquiringly. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and ordered the first Master Qin Yu and the second Master Qin Han to lead the way for the head eunuch. The two happily agreed. When the two were about to leave, old Madam didn't forget to instruct Nanny Qin. Quickly go and catch up with Brother Yu and Brother Han. Just say my words. Let them lead the way and don't be in a hurry to come back. It's important to bring their eldest aunt and cousin back as well. Hearing this, Mammy Qin felt that this matter was impossible. She swallowed the words of persuasion. In the end, she didn't offend the old madam and followed the order to chase out. Qin Han and Qin Yu were very embarrassed after receiving the order. They didn't want to be sandwiched between the old madam and Qin Yining. Qin Yu could suppress his temper and emotions, but Qin Han was an explosive temper. He liked to fight for injustice. He began to feel disdain when he heard the old madam's order. But he couldn't show his displeasure on his face because the head eunuch had to deliver the decree. Just like that, he persevered all the way to the forest returning tower and was successfully rewarded. Qin Han bowed and bowed Qin Han and politely. Sent and politely and politely. When he reached a place where there was no people, he went to a place and politely he went and looked and politely to bowed and politely sent bowed. Sent bowed and politely. After bowed and politely. Bowed immediately came forward with a smile and presented a stack of banknotes with both hands. My lady invites you to have tea. When the head eunuch saw the stack of banknotes, he beamed with joy and repeatedly bowed to thank him. In addition, Qin Yining's attitude towards him was very polite. The head eunuch felt very comfortable and knew what to say when he went back. After sending off the head eunuch, Qin Yining took bowed and returned to the backyard of the bowed. Qin Han and Qin Yu were talking with the Sun clan in the room. The old madam means that it's not convenient for Aunt to live outside. It's better to have more servants in the manor to take care of her. If Aunt likes peace and quiet, the old madam can also exempt you from the morning and evening routine. You can just stay in Xingning Garden to recuperate. No one is allowed to come and disturb you, Qin Yu said with a smile. When the Sun clan heard this, they were somewhat moved. She was Qin Huaiyuan's wife. Now that Qin Huaiyuan had been conferred the title of Marquis of Anping, she had also become a first-rank madam of Anping. Her title was even higher than the old madam's. At this moment, she really wanted to go back. On one hand, there would be many congratulatory and social events in the coming days. It wouldn't be good if she wasn't at home. On the other hand, she wanted to be able to raise her head in front of the old madam. She knew that the old madam didn't like her. Now that her title was higher than hers, what else could the old madam do? However, the Sun clan didn't immediately make a decision. Instead, they glanced hesitantly at Qin Yining. She didn't know when it started, but she would ask for Qin Yining's opinion whenever something happened. She was very dependent on her daughter. Perhaps it was because Duchess Ding and Qin Huaiyuan had told her this many times that she had formed a habit. When Qin Yu and Qin Han saw the Sun clan looking at Qin Yining, they understood who had the authority to make the decision here. His two cousins didn't have much contact with Qin Yining. Qin Yu's impression of Qin Yining came from his eldest grandmother, the Yao clan. Qin Han was a bit better. Apart from listening to his wife talk about matters of the inner residence when they chatted, he also taught Qin Yining the rules of the estate when she returned to the capital. Just as Qin Yu was hesitating about how to speak, Qin Han said, "Sister Yi, do you want to go back?" Qin Yining had always been grateful to Qin Han. On the way back to the capital, it was Qin Han who told her about the estate in private and taught her the rules so that she wouldn't make a fool of herself. It was because of this that she was able to pass the hurdle of greeting when she first returned to Qin Manor and quickly adapt to the new environment. Because of this, Qin Yining was closer to Qin Han. When she spoke, she restrained her sharpness and said with a smile, "It must be difficult for my two cousins to be assigned this task." Qin Han and Qin Yu were both sensible people. As soon as they heard this, they knew that she didn't intend to go back. Qin Yu was a bit displeased. "Fourth sister, are you planning to live outside with eldest aunt? Forgive me for saying too much, but fourth sister is still an unmarried woman. It's not good for her to be so domineering." Without waiting for Qin Yining to speak, Qin Han said disapprovingly, "Now you're saying that fourth sister is a woman. Why did you push her out during the peace talks? As the eldest cousin, you didn't speak up for her." "You." Qin Yu glared at Qin Han. Qin Han glared back, not to be outdone. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. "Eldest cousin, second cousin, don't be angry. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with the two cousins. You two know how I left home that day. If I go back like this, my mother will be wronged." Qin Yu couldn't help but frown. "You mean to say that we have to negotiate before we can go back?" "That's not it. I don't want to make things difficult for my two cousins. When you go back, tell grandmother that my mother's health is not good. After entering the palace, she has been frightened repeatedly. What she needs now is peace and quiet. Although Shining Garden is quiet, it's not as quiet as my business outside. When my mother gets better, as a granddaughter, I will naturally take my mother back." Hearing that, Qin Han felt satisfied in his heart. He patted Qin Yining's shoulder with a big smile and said, "Good job." Qin Yu rolled his eyes angrily. Qin Han had always had such a sharp temper. He was already used to it. He just didn't expect that a little girl like her could be so unafraid of trouble. There was actually someone who praised her. Although old Madam's methods were not honorable, shouldn't a woman pay attention to the three obedience and four virtues? It was no wonder that second sister-in-law was so spoiled by Qin Han that she didn't even touch a needle and thread. "Forget it." Qin Yu stood up, brushed his robe, and bowed to the Sun Clan. "Since eldest Anne has made such a decision, the two of us should take our leave and go back to report to old Madam." The Sun Clan was a little nervous, but in the end, they didn't have any intention of rebelling against Qin Yining. After Qin Yining sent his two cousins away, the Sun Clan immediately pulled Qin Yining and said, "Sister E, aren't we making things difficult for your father by staying here? Tell mother, what happened that day? Why are you obstructing me and not letting me go back?" Chapter 131. Qin Yining knew that Sun Clan was suspicious and would definitely ask, so he wasn't in a hurry to answer. He first smiled and brought over a cup of warm honey black tea. Then, he placed his hands next to Sun Clan's hands and comforted her. "Mother, don't be anxious. Father has tacitly allowed us to live here, so he won't feel embarrassed. Besides, we're only going back a few days late. There won't be any major problems in the Fu. It's not that I don't want you to go back, but if you want to go back, we have to go back with dignity. Dowager Duchess will have to give us an explanation. If we go back with a proper reason, we'll feel proud." Qin Yining's voice was soft and unhurried, making people feel comfortable. The aroma of the black tea and honey lingered around the nose. Sun Clan couldn't help but take a bite. It was warm and sweet in the mouth, warming her heart. Looking at Qin Yining's gentle smiling face, Sun Clan sighed and said, "Sister E, tell mother the truth. When I was dragged out to be beheaded that day, did Dowager Duchess make things difficult for you?" "It can't be considered as making things difficult." Qin Yining smiled. He didn't want to expose his mother, so he vaguely said, "Mother also knows Dowager Duchess's temperament. Besides, she's the head of the family Qin. What she has to consider is not only the safety of one person, but also the interests of the whole family." "It's already been a while, but you're still speaking up for your grandmother." Sun Clan sighed and took Qin Yining's hand and patted it. "Your grandmother is very snobbish. In order to curry favor with that bitch Chao Yuqing, she didn't even care about her face. I've been thinking about it carefully these past 2 days. His Majesty suddenly wanted to kill me. When the news reached home, you all must have been shocked. In fact, even if you don't say it, I can guess that Dowager Duchess must be afraid of getting into trouble and can't wait for me to die." Sun Clan's tone was angry, but Qin Yining could see that Sun Clan wasn't as arrogant and domineering as before. Although she was also angry now, she wouldn't blindly make a scene to vent her emotions. Sure enough, the cruel reality was the best teacher. Only by going through trials and tribulations could a person grow up quickly. "Mother, don't be angry. We just need to take one step at a time. As for what others think and do, it's not something we can control. We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way." Anyway, no matter when and where, Mother just needs to remember that your daughter will definitely stand on your side. Sister E. The members of the Sun clan looked at Qin Yining's beautiful face and held her hands tightly. After the careful treatment of Bing Tang, the scars on Qin Yining's hands had faded a little, and the calluses had also thinned. At least at first glance, one would not be able to tell that her hands were different from the hands of ordinary ladies. However, when the Sun clan held her hand, his fingertips could still feel the thick calluses and scars on her slightly rough palm. Thinking back to Qin Yining's coldness and suspicion when she returned to the Fu, the Sun clan could only feel regret. Qin Yining didn't know the complicated feelings of the Sun clan. She casually flipped through the gold, silver, and other rewards placed on the round table. She took out a black lacquered wooden box and opened it. Inside was a colored glass snuff bottle with an exquisite drawing of an aureole. It looked very lively and festive. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then smiled and instructed Bing Tang, "I'll have to trouble you to go out and buy me a snuff bottle. It has to be similar to this one." Bing Tang asked curiously, "Don't you have it? Why does Miss still want to buy it?" "This is a reward from the Emperor and Empress. I wouldn't dare to use it carelessly. It wouldn't be good if it gets damaged." Qin Yining smiled lightly and casually put down the box. She didn't seem to care much about it. Bing Tang didn't ask any more questions and quickly went out to buy the snuff bottle. Qin Yining instructed Song Lan to put away the imperial gift properly. Then, he chatted with the Sun clan about some cheerful topics. Just talking about Qin Huaiyuan's love for the Sun clan was enough to make the Sun clan happy. At the same time, in Ci Shao Garden, when the Dowager Duchess heard Qin Yu and Qin Han's reply, she was so angry that she immediately smashed her teacup. What a wild girl. She's the one who instigated her mother to be bad. Fine. I'll pretend that I don't have such an unfilial granddaughter. That idiot from the Sun clan likes to be wild. Let her be wild outside. Don't tell me that my son needs someone to serve him. Naturally, there will be more beautiful young women with a higher status than that stupid woman to serve my son. The Dowager Duchess was so angry that she didn't consider the situation. Her words directly made the faces of the young ladies on the side turn red. Second Madam frowned unhappily and waved her hand, indicating for Third Miss to take her cousins out. Third Madam stood beside the Dowager Duchess and tried to persuade her. Although they tried to persuade her, Second Madam and Third Madam couldn't stand the Dowager Duchess' way of doing things. As daughters-in-law, this matter now fell on the Sun clan. What if it fell on them in the future? The Sun clan had good fortune. Their maternal family had collapsed, but at least they had a filial and capable legitimate daughter. Moreover, the first master wasn't a muddle-headed person. If they were the ones in charge, they didn't know what would happen. Not to mention their husband's personality, but the daughter they raised didn't have Qin Yining's ability and courage. 7 or 8 days passed like this. The Qin Manor's inscribed board with the words Marquis of Anping's Manor, written by the Emperor, had been replaced. The Craftsman's Gate also started work on erecting an archway for the Sun clan in front of the family Qin's gate. It was a supreme honor for a woman to be praised by the Emperor to erect an archway. Moreover, how many first-rank title madams were there in the entire Dian? Now that spring had arrived, the weather was gradually warming up. The upper-class women and wealthy families who were preparing for the winter began to move about diligently. During this period of time, invitations for the Sun clan and Qin Yining to attend all kinds of banquets came one after another. At first, the Dowager Duchess said that the Sun clan wasn't feeling well. However, if she kept refusing like this, it would appear that the Dowager Duchess was obstructing them. If she wanted these people to send the invitations to Gui Lin Lu, it would appear that she, as a mother-in-law, couldn't tolerate her daughter-in-law. Thus, she chased out the proper mistress of the Marquis of Anping's Manor. In reality, the Dowager Duchess had already heard several rumors. Each of them speculated that she couldn't tolerate her daughter-in-law and wanted to fight for power with her daughter-in-law. The Dowager Duchess got up early in the morning and instructed Mammy Qin to go and persuade Qin Yining and the Sun clan to return. However, in the morning, Mammy Chin also returned in low spirits. The Dowager Duchess finally couldn't take it anymore. She called Qin Huaiyuan, who had just returned home from the Yamen, to come over and reprimand him. However, Qin Huaiyuan spoke with conviction. In the end, it wasn't this son who drove my wife and daughter away. This son is busy with court affairs and doesn't have the heart to manage these matters. Mother should share this son's burden. You mean you want me to go invite people? The Dowager Duchess was flabbergasted. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, Mother is an expert in managing the family. How could this son understand these matters? Mother should make the decision. After he finished speaking, he hurriedly took his leave and went to the study in the outer courtyard to see his aides. The Dowager Duchess was so angry that her teeth itched. In the end, it was more important to preserve her face. She could only instruct Mammy Chin, prepare the carriage. I want to personally go to Guilin Lu. I don't believe that damned girl can still be arrogant when she sees me. Mammy Chin complied and hurriedly instructed people to prepare the carriage. Chapter 132. Young lady. This servant was just chatting with someone outside. Bing Tang excitedly entered the room and said, This servant went to take a look and went to the front to ask about young lady's whereabouts. It was Mammy Chin. Young lady is really good at scheming. Old madam really came in person. How could she not come in person? Qin Yining played with the brand new snuff bottle in his hand and said with a smile, These 2 days, the people who came to call us back have never stopped. Something must have happened in the Fu again. Old madam needs my mother to support the front, and I'm afraid she can't handle it herself. Bing Tang, go and invite madam to come here. Let Song Lan receive the distinguished guests outside. Yes. Bing Tang's big round eyes were full of excitement as she ran out. Not long after, Mother Jean, Kai Ju, and Kai Lan accompanied the Sun clan into the door. The Sun clan sat down beside Qin Yining and smiled. Is there something good? Just now, I saw that Bing Tang girl smiling so happily, as if she had picked up a big gold ingot. Qin Yining stood up and went to bring some fruits and pastries for his mother. He also brought a bowl of hot tea and gently placed the blue and white porcelain bowl beside the Sun clan's hand. The people outside said that old madam brought her personal attendants and condescended to come in person. The Sun clan's hand that was holding the tea paused. They hadn't seen each other for many days. Now that they suddenly heard that old madam was coming, the Sun clan actually felt nervous. Qin Yining saw through the Sun clan's thoughts and smiled. Mother, don't be nervous. You just have to do things according to your heart. Moreover, you have never let old madam down in any way. That's right, it was old madam who didn't care about her feelings at all. When something happened at Duke Ding Fu, old madam's first thought wasn't to comfort her, but to divorce her. After that, she had never stopped suppressing her. After Madame Chow married into the family, the abuse became even more severe. The Sun clan's originally wavering heart became firm once again. Madam, young miss, old madam is here. Song Lan, who was standing in the corridor, replied with a smile. The members of the Sun clan and Qin Yining looked at each other and stood up to greet him. Old madam looked at the fresh and elegant backyard of Guilin Tower, and her heart was filled with anger. As soon as he entered the courtyard with white walls and black tiles, the tiles on the ground were clean and tidy. A tall osmanthus tree stood at the side. If it was autumn, the entire tree would be filled with the fragrance of osmanthus. Walking up the stairs, he saw that there was a light blue bamboo curtain embroidered with 100 butterflies hanging on the door of the main room. 2 green jade gourds were pressed against the corners of the curtain. As the curtain moved, the light blue tassels below moved in a lively and elegant arc. Just by looking at the curtain, he could feel that the person living inside was definitely a young woman, and that the person living inside was definitely in a very happy mood. Old madam thought about her belly full of anger these past few days, and then looked at the smiling Sun clan and Qin Yining, who lifted the curtain to welcome her. She felt like she had eaten a caddy of Chinese gold thread. Old madam, you actually came in person. You really bring light to my humble shop. Please forgive us for not coming out to welcome you. Qin Yining and Sun Clan saluted old madam. They also nodded to Mammy Qin, who was beside old madam, and then they helped old madam up the stairs. They were so polite, as if there had never been any discord between them. Raising one's hand doesn't hit a smiling person. Qin Yining was so polite that old madam couldn't do anything. She just snorted and said half seriously and half jokingly, "If I didn't come, you didn't plan to go back, right? You were waiting for me, this old woman, to personally come and invite you back." As old madam spoke, she looked at the furnishings inside the room. The Arhut bed next to the window was carved with a picture of a magpie on a branch. It was even more exquisite than the picture of a magpie on a branch in the main room of her CI Shao garden. All the furnishings in the multi-treasure pavilion were also luxurious and exquisite. The hanging light green tulle and the bead curtain were actually strung with pearls the size of a grain of rice. Old madam couldn't help but feel a little sour in her heart. No wonder the mother and daughter didn't want to go home. Living here wasn't much worse than living in the Fu. She didn't expect that Duchess Ding, that old noob, would casually give her granddaughter Zhao Yunxi to have such a background. She didn't know how much background Zhao Yunxi had. Unfortunately, this thing was under Qin Yining's name, so she couldn't do anything about it. Old madam unconsciously held the bead curtain in her hand. Her face was gloomy, and the greed and indignation in her eyes couldn't be hidden. Upon seeing this, Mammy Qin frowned and helped old madam up for fear that she would be found out. However, Qin Yining said with a smile, "Old madam, please take a seat. That's a bead curtain bestowed by the emperor. Old madam, look at the quality of the pearls. Is it good?" Old madam was so scared that she immediately withdrew her hand. If the bead curtain bestowed by the emperor was broken, she couldn't bear the responsibility. As old madam sat down, she praised, "In the end, it's a gift from the emperor. When it's hung up, the entire room becomes bright. The emperor enjoys the riches and honor of the emperor, so naturally, he bestows good things." On the side, Mother Jean, Kaiju, Bing Tang, and the others all lowered their heads to hold back their laughter. The Sun Clan coughed to hide their laughter and brought a cup of tea for old madam. Then, they brought a cup of tea and sat down next to old madam. "Old madam, how have you been these days? Daughter-in-law, your complexion is much better than before. Leoi has been conferred the title of Marquis, and the family has brought honor to our ancestors. Presumably, old madam is also in high spirits. It's a pity that daughter-in-law's body isn't good, and I was frightened. I don't have the good fortune to celebrate with old madam." Old madam looked up and down at the Sun Clan and saw that she was wearing a dark blue brocade with a waistband. Her hair was neatly tied into a high bun, and she only wore a pure silver and sapphire embedded hairpin. The collar button was also the same style of sapphire embedded with 100 flowers. Although it was a morning dress, it was simple yet luxurious, especially the pleasant smell of jasmine mixed with medicinal fragrance. It was actually this year's newest popular jasmine hair oil from the capital's Jiao Rong workshop. Jiao Rong workshop had risen overnight because its rouge and face powder had medicinal ingredients. The ratio was extremely refined, and the effect was particularly good. The jasmine hair oil used by the Sun Clan could make the dark hair more supple and also let the white grow slowly. Now, it was already sold for 50 taels of silver per jar. Now, being able to use the rouge and face powder produced by Jiao Rong Workshop was already a symbol of the status of noble women. Old madam had gotten a small jar a few days ago. She wanted to hold a banquet before using it. It would also appear dignified. She didn't expect that the Sun Clan would actually use it as ordinary rouge and face powder on a daily basis. Where did the Sun Clan get so much money? Naturally, it was given by Qin Yining or Qin Huaiyuan. The sourness in old madam's stomach was about to materialize, and her words couldn't help but have a sour taste. "What are you saying? I see that you are very happy. You use Jiao Rong Workshop's rouge and face powder, wear silk and satin, and eat delicacies. You don't look like you're recuperating from an illness. Instead, you come out to enjoy. If it was someone who didn't know better, they would probably guess that you have a new patron. When the Sun Clan heard this, their faces immediately sank. It seemed that her soft-heartedness was a sign of stupidity. People like Old Madam didn't deserve to be soft-hearted. Before the Sun Clan could speak, Qin Ening smiled and put a plate of desserts in Old Madam's hand. "Grandmother, eat some desserts to avoid bitterness." "You!" Old Madam angrily glared at him. Qin Ening smiled and said, "I only hate that I'm a woman. Otherwise, I would definitely rely on my own efforts to earn a phoenix coronet and robe for my mother. Now, I'm only provided with extravagant clothing and food. How can that be considered as enjoyment? Eating well, wearing well, and using well isn't the ultimate enjoyment in the world." Being glorified and envied by tens of thousands of people is enjoyment. Qin Ening's words both suppressed and praised Old Madam. She didn't know whether she should be angry or laugh. Old Madam looked at Qin Ening and sneered. "Your mother is blessed to have such a formidable daughter like you. Doesn't Old Madam also have the same blessing to have such a formidable eldest son?" Qin Ening smiled. Old Madam choked from the rebuttal. When she thought that Qin Huaiyun didn't side with her in this matter, her anger surged. "Since I've personally come here today, I think you shouldn't put on airs anymore. Quickly pack your things and follow me back. Sun Clan, you're my family's matriarch after all. Now, you're a first-rank noble lady. Could it be that you really let your husband handle all the matters of the manor's guests? Then what's the use of having a daughter-in-law like you?" She was clearly mocking the Sun Clan for being unvirtuous. Sun Clan's face also darkened. Old Madam's words are unreasonable. Although the family doesn't have a first-rank noble lady like me, isn't there still Mother, a first-rank noble lady? Mother is a veteran in managing the inner residence. She's been through many years of experience. Naturally, she's better at judging the situation than daughter-in-law. She knows who to befriend and who to alienate. She was secretly mocking Old Madam for being fickle. Old Madam's face was so gloomy that water could be squeezed out of it. Sun Clan's face was also gloomy, and they weren't willing to back down. Qin Ening stood to the side and silently played with his snuff bottle. The atmosphere in the room was like a layer of frost on a winter day. After a moment of deadlock, Old Madam gritted her teeth and softened her voice. "Sun Clan, if you return to the manor now, it'll look good for everyone. Moreover, there's still concubine Chow in the manor. Are you at ease, leaving your husband in the hands of only concubine?" Sun Clan's heart was bleeding, but they didn't seem to care. Daughter-in-law isn't a jealous woman. If Laoi likes, daughter-in-law can take an 8 or 10 beautiful concubines to serve Laoi. However, I don't know how Old Madam will explain it to concubine Chow at that time. You stupid woman." Old Madam finally couldn't bear it anymore. She stood up and raised her hand to slap Sun Clan's face. Sun Clan's members were so frightened that they cried out in alarm. Qin Ening hurriedly stepped forward to stop her. But in the midst of the panic, Old Madam's slap landed on Qin Ening's hand and sent the snuff bottle she was playing with flying to the ground. The colored glass snuff bottle made a sharp shattering sound, and a strong smell of mint filled the room. Old Madam wanted to get angry again, but Qin Ening said with a pale face, it's over. Grandmother, you've caused a big disaster. That snuff bottle was the Empress Dowager's favorite item when she was alive. It accompanied the Empress Dowager for more than 30 years. Even the Empress had to kneel down when she saw that snuff bottle. His Majesty just rewarded it to me, yet Grandmother broke it. If His Majesty finds out, how will we explain it? Chapter 133. Qin Ening anxiously shed tears and choked with unwillingness. When the imperial gift came, the emperor ordered us to use it as we wished. Such an exquisite item, we naturally took it out and used it, Old Madam broke it. Not only did she casually destroy the imperial gift, but she also blamed us for obeying the imperial edict. It's really unreasonable. Old Madam was so anxious that her forehead was sweating. 2 more white hairs were about to grow. Old Madam, that was the snuff bottle that the Empress Dowager used when she was alive. Even the Empress had to kneel when she saw it. How dare you? How dare you? Sun Clan finally recovered and covered their faces as they sobbed. What snuff bottle? I've never seen it before. I don't know what you're talking about. Old Madam snorted and calmly turned to leave. When she passed by the bead curtain, she lifted the curtain with extra caution. Mammy Chin, Ji Xiong, and Ru Yi recovered and hurriedly bowed. They followed Old Madam out in a panic. The entire room was silent. The mess of the broken snuff bottle on the ground and the smell of mint snuff in the air proved the farce just now. Song Lan and Bing Tang looked at each other and quietly went to the courtyard to check. After confirming that Old Madam and the others had gone far away, they couldn't help but laugh. Mother Jean helped Sun Clan to sit down and instructed Kai Ju and Kai Lan to take a dustpan to clean up the broken pieces on the ground. She smiled and said, "That day, when Miss asked Bing Tang to find a similar snuff bottle, you had already calculated this, right?" "Yes." Qin Ening smiled happily. "I didn't expect her to be even more cowardly than I expected." Sun Clan couldn't help but laugh when they thought of Old Madam's fleeing appearance. The anger and grievance that filled them just now dissipated along with the laughter. However, after laughing, she was also puzzled and worried. "Sister Yi, if your father knew that you teased Old Madam like this, he wouldn't like it. Don't look at how he tacitly allowed us to live here. Your father is the most filial person. If Old Madam really thinks that she broke the imperial gift, and it's even something that the Empress Dowager has used before, she will be afraid when she goes back. She might even fall seriously ill." Speaking of this, the Sun Clan member frowned worriedly. "If your father asks, just say that it was my idea. Anyway, I don't have a good image in the eyes of the family Qin people. You are different. You will still have to talk about marriage in the future." Qin Ening was deeply moved. He sat beside the Sun Clan and hugged her waist, acting like a spoiled child. "Mother dotes on me. Don't you care what father says about you? I'm not afraid. Your father and I have been husband and wife for a long time. It's not like we've never had a falling out before. Anyway, I don't have the backing of your landlord's family, so this is how it will be in the future." The Sun Clan was now used to Qin Ening's closeness. He patted her shoulder and said, "You're different. You're an unmarried girl. You're different from me." "Mother, you treat me so well." Qin Ening smiled and hugged the Sun Clan. The Sun Clan's heart ached when they heard this. In fact, she really didn't treat Qin Ening well. Although she worked hard to get familiar with Qin Ening and treated her well, they had only known each other for a short time. The care she gave to Qin Ening was far less than what she gave to Qin Huaining. Now that Qin Huaining was like this, it formed a strong contrast with Qin Ening's filial piety and loyalty. The more easily Qin Ening was satisfied, the more guilty the Sun Clan felt. She gently rocked Qin Ening, as if coaxing a baby in swaddling clothes. "Mother will treat you well in the future. Mother, as long as you take good care of your body, that will be the best for your daughter." Qin Ening's tone was satisfied and light. Mother Jean and the others couldn't help but tear up when they saw this scene. In the end, a friend in need was a friend indeed. Mother and daughter were connected by blood, so there would be a day when the clouds parted. Qin Ening lazily lay in the Sun Clan's arms and acted spoiled. She was afraid that the Sun Clan would be tired, so she sat up straight after a moment. After thinking for a moment, she called for Song Lan to come in and say, "Go and pack up our things." She then turned to Mother Jean and said, "I'll have to trouble Mother to pack up my mother's things. We'll go back to the residence in a bit." The Sun Clan said in surprise, "Why are we suddenly going back?" She thought that Qin Ening had made up her mind not to go back. It wasn't just the Sun Clan. Everyone had this question. Qin Ening burst into laughter. "Mother, we're staying outside for a while and not going back to the residence immediately because we want an explanation. We want you to return to the residence with glory so that no one will dare to look down on you. We want you to be able to live smoothly in the future in the residence as usual. Now that the matriarch has personally come to invite us, this dignity is enough to offset her clamor that day and let her slap her own face. Our goal has been achieved. If we go back now, we can even see the matriarch's wonderful expression. If we don't go back, then wouldn't the fault be ours? Forcing the matriarch to personally come and invite them was their ability. If they didn't go back when the matriarch came to invite them, then it would be unfilial. Even if they had reason, it would become unreasonable. Mother Jean and the Sun Clan nodded repeatedly. The Sun Clan asked again, "Since that's the case, why did you set up a trap to deceive the matriarch?" Qin Ening smiled and said, "If we don't show our sharp claws, she'll probably think we're dead cats. With this incident, it'll be good for her to rest for a few days." But after all, the broken item wasn't the real imperial bestowed item. If she goes back and spreads it, wouldn't you be deceiving the monarch? The Sun Clan's expression turned ugly when they thought of this. Qin Ening comforted them. If she's a little bit smarter, she won't tell anyone about today's incident. Breaking an imperial bestowed item is a crime that she can't wait to push away. Why would she spread it? If she's not smart enough, she can ask father, but my father is definitely smart enough. He'll definitely suppress this news and ask me. The Sun Clan pondered for a moment and slowly nodded. She then asked, "If your father asks you, how will you answer?" Your father is very smart. You won't be able to fool him when he's free. Mother, don't worry. I naturally have a way to deal with it. Qin Ening smiled and said, "Let's make some preparations now and set off in a while. We'll rush back before dinner and pay respects to the matriarch." When the Sun Clan heard this, she lightly pinched Qin Ening's cheek. "Bad girl. You're the only one with so many wicked ideas." Mother Jean laughed. "It's fortunate that fourth young miss has an idea. Otherwise, we would have been bullied into the dust." The Sun Clan thought of the days she lived after Duke Ding's estate was destroyed. If it wasn't for Qin Ening accompanying her at all times and shielding her from all of her troubles, she might have already been driven crazy. The Sun Clan's arms around Qin Ening tightened. In less than an hour, everything had been packed. Qin Ening went to the front desk to see the shopkeeper. She instructed him to send someone to inform Master Zhong that she had already returned to the estate. She then rode a carriage with her mother back to the Qin estate. When the carriage slowly passed the street corner in front of the Qin estate, they saw craftsmen and people busily working not far away. They were rushing to set up a memorial arch for the Sun Clan. When they arrived at the entrance of the estate, the original plaque of the Qin estate had been replaced with a large gilded plaque with the words "Marquis of Anping's estate" inscribed by the emperor himself. The walls had been repainted and the black tiles had been tidied. Looking at the entrance of the estate, the entire family Qin seemed to be full of vitality. Although the emperor was an incapable ruler, having a large plaque inscribed by the emperor himself was also a supreme honor. When the Sun Clan saw the words "Marquis of Anping's estate," pride involuntarily rose in their hearts, and their backs straightened even more. Qin Ening ordered someone to pass on the message. Then, he helped the Sun Clan out of the carriage and whispered into the Sun Clan's ear, "Mother is recuperating outside and hasn't recovered yet. Now that the matriarch has personally come to invite us, we can only return home out of filial piety. Mother, don't get angry when you encounter something. Just focus on recuperating and leave the rest to your daughter." The Sun Clan held back her laughter and nodded. "I understand." Then, she generously leaned on Qin Ening and really looked a bit weak from her illness. At this time, the matriarch was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She pulled on Qin Huaiyuan's hand and said, "Brother Meng, I have an important matter to tell you." "Mother, please speak." The matriarch looked around and saw that there was only Mammy Qin attending to her. So she said, "The snuff bottle that the emperor bestowed to Sister E was broken by Sister E today. I saw it with my own eyes. That was something that the Empress Dowager had used before. Even the Empress had to kneel down when she saw it. Say, Sister E, you're so careless. You don't even know how to put away the imperial gift, and you even took it out casually. Now that you've broken it, what are you going to do if the emperor finds out? If the emperor punished her, wouldn't the whole family be implicated? When Mammy Chin heard this, she couldn't help but lower her head and frown. She was already so old. She had done something wrong and wanted to find her son to think of a way to remedy it. Yet she didn't tell the truth. Qin Huaiyun asked strangely, "Sister, he isn't a person with an arrogant temper. She also has a sense of propriety. Why would she deliberately break the snuff bottle bestowed by the emperor?" When the matriarch heard this, the expression on the matriarch's face became a bit stiff. She said sourly, "Today, I personally went to invite your good wife and good daughter to come home. Unexpectedly, I didn't manage to invite them back and even had to eat a meal. Sister, he had a bad temper and broke the snuff bottle. Instead, she blamed it on me. Why is my life so bitter to have such a seed that causes trouble in the family?" As the matriarch spoke, she covered her face and sobbed. Mammy Chin, who was at the side, hurriedly took a handkerchief to wipe her tears and persuaded her in a low voice. Qin Huaiyuan understood the matriarch's temperament the best. Her words were full of loopholes and were really suspicious. Qin Huaiyuan looked inquiringly at Mammy Chin. When Mammy Chin met Qin Huaiyuan's scrutinizing eyes, her gaze was somewhat evasive. It wasn't good for her to directly expose her master, but it wasn't right to hide it from Qin Huaiyuan either. When Qin Huaiyuan saw Mammy Chin like this, he was even more certain of his thoughts. Right at this moment, someone came in from outside. Replying to the matriarch, the Marquis, Madam and Fourth Miss have returned. They are heading to Ci Shao Garden to pay respects to the matriarch. When the matriarch heard this, she was so scared that she hiccuped. Sure enough, it was that bitch who schemed against her. She had just complained that they refused to come back, and even ate her. And in the blink of an eye, they came back. Then wouldn't she be spreading rumors? When the matriarch raised her head and met Qin Huaiyuan's suspicious gaze, her heart turned cold. She couldn't help but curse. That bitch actually has the guts to swagger back to pay respects. Chapter 134. Upon hearing this, old Madam looked at Qin Huaiyuan in disbelief. She had just cried for a long time and didn't squeeze out many tears, but in the blink of an eye, her tears were streaming down. "You unfilial son, you've made up your mind to help your wife bully me. Now you're saying that I'm going to call them back? Didn't I listen to you? If you're willing to give the order to call them back, I don't believe that they won't listen to you since one of them is your wife and the other is your daughter. You're siding with outsiders, and now you're saying this kind of words to block my heart. You've really forgotten your mother after marrying a wife. What sin have I committed?" Qin Huaiyuan helplessly frowned. As a son, he knew old Madam's temper the best. If she didn't have a reason, she would cry and make a scene. She was facing her own family members, and no matter what considerations they had to give in to old Madam in the end. Especially him. He couldn't bear to see his mother's body hurt from crying. Qin Huaiyuan could only persuade her softly. "Mother's words are too serious. Son is just stating the facts. You gave the order, and they came back. How good is this?" "Good? I'm almost angered to death by your wife. Is this a good thing?" Qin Huaiyuan helplessly said, "Mother, you've forgotten that it was you who made the decision for Son's marriage. Moreover, the Sun clan didn't do anything wrong after marrying into the family." "Didn't do anything wrong? She can't give birth to a legitimate son, and you call that didn't do anything wrong? She already gave birth to a legitimate daughter. This proves that it's not that she can't give birth." Qin Huaiyuan's hidden pain was poked, and his patience was about to be worn out. Old Madam saw Qin Huaiyuan's sunken face and realized what she had said in a moment of desperation. In fact, old Madam also had some doubts about whether Qin Huaiyuan had a problem, but after all, Her son was a person with strong self-esteem. She didn't want to ask more and hurt him. Just at this moment, a servant's announcement came from the corridor. Old Madam, the eldest Madam and fourth Miss have returned. Immediately, the dark green curtain was lifted, and Sheen Ening supported the Sun Clan to enter the door. The members of the Sun Clan had changed into their usual dark green, plain clothes. Their hair was still tied into a bun with a silver hairpin. Sheen Ening, on the other hand, was wearing a white coat and skirt. Her long hair was combed into two flat buns with a ribbon. Both mother and daughter did not wear any makeup, but their bodies exuded the elegant and pleasant fragrance of jasmine. It was the fragrance of the jasmine flower from Jiao Rome Workshop. Old Madam's heart was sour and angry. In addition, she had cried just now. At this moment, she was in a foul mood. Hence, she glared fiercely at the Sun Clan and turned her head away. The Sun Clan was infuriated by Old Madam's actions. Just as she was about to speak, she felt Sheen Ening pinch her arm. The members of the Sun Clan immediately understood. They took a deep breath and suppressed their anger. Together with Sheen Ening, they came forward to greet the Old Madam. Daughter-in-law greets Old Madam. Granddaughter pays respect to Old Madam. Once Old Madam gave the order, Mother rushed back without caring about her health. Old Madam was so angry that her heart was beating wildly like a drum. She coldly snorted and said, "Didn't you say you weren't willing to come back? First, you lied to me and said you wouldn't come back. Now you're back. You're clearly playing with an old woman like me." The Sun Clan bit her lip and lowered her head. Her face was flushed red from anger. Sheen Ening bent his knees and said, "Old Madam, please calm down. You're thinking too much. These days, Mother has been sick. She's recuperating outside because she's worried about her illness. Since Old Madam loves Mother dearly, how can we not know how to appreciate her kindness?" Glib tongue. I can't win against you. Old Madam angrily slammed the table. Sheen Ening pursed her lips in grievance and also lowered her head. Qin Huan pinched the bridge of his nose and said, "You two go back first. Don't disturb Mother's peace here." Yes, the Sun Clan and Qin Ening readily accepted good advice. They bowed and left. Qin Huan also bowed and said, "Mother, rest well. Son still has government affairs to deal with." Seeing that Qin Huayuan was about to leave, Old Madam didn't even have time to be angry. She said, "That broken snuff bottle, what do you plan to do?" "Mother," Qin Huayuan covered Old Madam's mouth and said in a low voice, "How can Mother still dare to make a fuss about this kind of thing? Just pretend that this matter didn't happen." Old Madam's heart suddenly jumped. She only wanted to clear her name and forgot that if this matter was revealed, it would affect the survival of the entire family Qin. Old Madam nodded with a pale face. She didn't dare to make a fuss anymore. Qin Huayan sighed and said, "The Emperor has bestowed many things. Moreover, the Empress Dowager also has many things. It's possible that the imperial family didn't care about this thing when they bestowed it. Besides, no one will take the initiative to ask us. You can just pretend that you don't know anything." Old Madam nodded repeatedly. She was as obedient as a child. Qin Huayuan bowed to Old Madam again and retreated. Seeing Qin Huayuan walk away, Old Madam said faintly, "Lu Juan, do you think I did something wrong?" Mammy Qin had already nodded silently in her heart. However, she said, "Old Madam, you did it for the sake of the in-laws. What did you do wrong?" Old Madam shook her head and sighed. The gold and ruby inlaid in her bun swayed, reflecting the candlelight and appearing particularly dazzling. "Actually, I should have pretended that I didn't know about the snuff bottle." I shouldn't have asked Brother Meng. Brother Meng is very smart. Perhaps he has guessed something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have talked to me like that. So, Old Madam regretted this matter? Mammy Qin was speechless for a moment. She could only comfort old madam with what she liked to hear. After Qin Huaiyuan left Ci Shao Garden, he didn't immediately go to the outer courtyard. Instead, he returned to Xingning Garden first. Sure enough, as he expected, Qin Yining stayed to chat with the Sun clan after seeing them off and didn't leave. Qin Huaiyuan beat the servants. When there were only the family of 3 left in the room, he asked, "Sister Yi, did you really break a snuff bottle today?" Qin Yining nodded obediently and told him what happened today. In the end, she said, "Old madam was angry and wanted to beat my mother. I didn't expect that when I went to stop her, the thing was sent flying by old madam." Qin Huaiyuan frowned and sighed. "Was that really the Empress Dowager's snuff bottle?" "Yes." Qin Yining smiled slyly. It was the same model as the Empress Dowager's snuff bottle. Qin Huaiyuan looked at her fox-like expression and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He figured out the cause and effect in an instant. He pointed his finger at Qin Yining's forehead. "You little girl, you're so bad. You even dared to play tricks on your grandmother." Qin Yining touched her forehead that didn't hurt at all and naughtily stuck out her tongue. "Father, please calm down." Daughter didn't want to target old madam. Presumably, what father heard about the snuff bottle was different from what daughter said. His daughter's actions were just a harmless show of strength to intimidate the tiger. "Otherwise, when you weren't at home, wouldn't my mother be at a disadvantage?" Qin Huaiyuan looked at the Sun clan gently. The Sun clan had long been shocked by the way father and son interacted. When they saw Qin Huaiyuan looking over, they smiled awkwardly. "This, Master, don't be angry. It was all this concubine's bad idea." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and waved his hand. "I know. This idea must have come from Sister Yi. You don't have to help Sister Yi. You're a kind and honest person, unlike Sister Yi, whose mind is full of schemes." The Sun clan didn't know how to respond. Qin Yining snorted. "Father, are you praising your daughters?" Qin Huaiyuan patted Qin Yining's shoulder and couldn't help but laugh. Mother Jean, Kaiju, and Song Lan also laughed. Chao Yuqing stood in the corridor and listened to the laughter in the room. Her expression was very calm as she said loudly, "Marquis, Madam, this concubine specially came to pay respects to Madam." The laughter in the room stopped abruptly. Qin Huaiyuan's indifferent voice was heard. "Come in." Chapter 135. The room was brightly lit, and the exquisite carousel lantern hung under the dusty sky. On the lantern, there was a vivid picture of the 8 immortals crossing the sea. The bright and vivid characters slowly rotated, sprinkling a faint halo under Chao Yuqing's feet. She couldn't help but stop and look at it for a moment. This was the main hall of Xingning Garden, the place where Qin Huaiyuan stayed the longest, except for the study in the outer courtyard. Moreover, it was with another woman. Chao Yuqing lowered her long eyelashes. After a while, she passed through the floor-to-ceiling cover and went to the side room. Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan sat on the left and right side of the carved hut bed by the window. Qin Huaiyuan leisurely drank tea. The Sun clan's left hand, which wore a green jade bracelet, was playing with the fried pumpkin seeds on the plate. The jade bracelet on her snow-white wrist made a slight sound as it touched the low table. Qin Yining could see the Sun clan's displeasure. He patted her shoulder to comfort her. Then he stood beside the Sun clan and openly admired the beauty. The light green veil outlined Chao Yuqing's well-proportioned figure. Her long raven hair was tied into a falling horse bun and fixed by a golden-laid jade butterfly hairpin. Her steps were light as she walked. Her skirt was charming, her waist was graceful, her ears swayed, her lips were sweet, and her watery eyes were affectionate. She was as bright and moving as a delicate flower reflected in the water. It was said that she was already 30 years old. However, time seemed to treat her particularly well. It didn't leave any frost on her face. It only settled the temperament of a mature woman. With a flourishing appearance and a heart full of tenderness, Qin Yining believed that few men could escape the tenderness of such a beauty. Objectively speaking, Chao Yuqing looked like Qin Yining's elder sister. The middle-aged Sun clan and Chao Yuqing looked like mother and daughter. The Sun clan naturally realized this. Her hands clenched the carved armrest of the Arhut bed. She repeatedly told herself to be calm, to be shrewd, and to endure at the right time. She couldn't continue to indulge her emotions. She warned herself several times before she forced herself to calm down. Chao Yuqing gracefully bowed. This concubine greets Marquis and Madam. I heard that Madam wasn't feeling well and was recuperating outside. I was very worried about you these days. Now that I can see that Madam is fine, I can be at ease. With Qin Huaiyuan in charge, and Chao Yuqing's etiquette, speech, and behavior were all correct, the Sun clan could only put on a gentle smile. Concubine Chao is too kind. Mother Jean, take a seat, pick some oranges, and serve tea. Thank you, madam. Chao Yuqing bowed again, and then stood up with the help of her personal maidservant. Concubine Chao, please have a seat. Mother Jean brought over an embroidered stool and placed a soft and thick light blue embroidered mattress on it. Chao Yuqing smiled and thanked Mother Jean. She was born with a natural charm. When she smiled, her eyes curved, and Mother Jean almost fell into a daze. Qin Yining subconsciously looked at Qin Huaiyuan's expression. She saw that Qin Huaiyuan was only holding a teacup and taking small sips. His eyes were lowered as he observed the movement of the tender green leaves in the tea. It was as if there was no such peerless beauty in front of him. Qin Yining couldn't help but admire her father's character and willpower. But she also became more and more confused. Qin Huaiyuan used to have concubines, and it wasn't as if he didn't spend the night in one of them. But why didn't Qin Huaiyuan care about this great beauty that he could rightfully possess? Chao Yuqing and the Demon Empress were both beauties that could topple a city. Even though Qin Yining didn't think that Qin Huaiyuan would be like an incapable ruler who didn't love his country and loved beauties, there was no reason not to eat the meat that was sent to his mouth. But everyone knew that Qin Huaiyuan and Chao Yuqing didn't consummate their marriage. Qin Huaiyuan only supported Chao Yuqing with good food and shelter. He gave her the greatest convenience in this welfare life, but he wasn't willing to touch her. Was it because Chao Yuqing's father was Chao Guozhang? While Qin Yining was deep in thought, Chao Yuqing had already chatted with the Sun clan for a while. She then explained the purpose of her visit. A few days ago, this concubine made a wish at the Immortal Lady Temple. I asked the Lady Mother of the Chariot to bless Master and fourth young mistress' safe return and for everything to go smoothly. Now that all the difficulties have been resolved, this concubine is thinking of going to Xian Gu Temple tomorrow to fulfill the vow, and at the same time conduct a few more days of peace ritual for the people in the manor. This concubine wants to ask Madam if you and fourth miss are going together. When the Sun clan heard this, they almost agreed. She hadn't seen her mother and sister-in-law for more than a month. She didn't know if the women folk of Ding General Manor were used to living in the Immortal Lady Temple. However, the Sun clan suddenly remembered that she was sick. If she immediately went to the Immortal Lady Temple alive and kicking, wouldn't Qin Huaiyuan see that she was pretending to be sick to play with old Madam? Qin Huaiyuan had forgiven Qin Yining, but that was because Sister Yi was too cute and was Qin Huaiyuan's biological daughter. She was so similar to Qin Huaiyuan when he was young. Qin Huaiyuan had high hopes for Qin Yining. They had talked and gone through thick and thin together. Naturally, he could forgive his own flesh and blood. But the Sun clan was different. She was a wife, and a legitimate wife who had no children. In front of a beautiful concubine, her family had no chance of winning. If she couldn't win with virtue, how could she give Qin Huaiyuan a reason to protect her? Therefore, the Sun clan weakly held her forehead and said, Concubine Chao is really considerate. It's just that although I want to go with you, I'm not feeling well. I'm afraid that if I recover, I'll have to leave the estate to avoid illness. Why don't Sister go with you on my behalf?" The last sentence was said while looking at Qin Yining. Qin Yining looked at the Sun clan with heartache. His mother was able to change her temperament in a short time. It was tantamount to experiencing a baptism of disaster to grow up. In the eyes of others, the Sun clan was still domineering in their 40s. However, in Qin Yining's eyes, she was just too well protected. Qin Yining was happy that the Sun clan had changed, but he also felt heartache for the reason why the Sun clan had changed. "Okay," Qin Yining said softly. "Mother, don't worry. Your daughter will kowtow to Lady Mother of the Chariot and ask her to protect our family." Chao Yuqing smiled at Qin Yining. "Fourth Miss is so considerate." Qin Yining then remembered that Qin Huaining was Chao Yuqing's adopted daughter. She didn't want to deal with these people now. She was afraid that she couldn't control her temper. If she beat up Qin Huaining outside, Qin Huaining's nose and face would be swollen. It would be quite tiring for her to beat people up. "Then I will go with Concubine Chao tomorrow. After all, Xingu Temple is a quiet place. Let's travel light and not bring anyone else." Qin Yining went straight to the point. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Chao Yuqing blinked and understood that Qin Yining was referring to Qin Huaining. She quickly nodded and said, "Fourth Miss is right. This concubine also has the same intention." She stood up and curtsied. "Since this is the case, this concubine will not disturb Marquis and Madam. See you tomorrow morning." Qin Yining returned half a curtsy. Then as Concubine Chao said, "See you tomorrow," this concubine will take her leave. Chao Yuqing slowly retreated. Before she left, she looked at Qin Huaiyuan. She saw that he was still drinking tea and didn't even look at her. Chao Yuqing felt a stab in her heart. Qin Yining saw that her parents were silent and thought that she shouldn't stay any longer. She also took her leave and returned to the Shuren Temple. When she saw Qiu Lu and the others, she naturally greeted them. After bathing, Qin Yining hugged the soft and furry air by and lay on the bed. She fell asleep in a daze. Chapter 136. Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing rode in the same carriage. Qin Yining brought Bing Tang, while Chao Yuqing brought along an old nanny. The four of them sat on both sides of the carriage. Outside the carriage were 6 guards. Qin Yining and Bing Tang both sat in a dignified and elegant manner. The old nanny brought by Chao Yuqing was slightly more relaxed. Chao Yuqing, on the other hand, was lazily leaning against a large pillow. She held a small bag of snacks in her hand. Her cherry lips were slightly pouted as she ate a plum while reading a storybook. From time to time, she would let out a light laugh. Her voice was delicate and soft. When she laughed, she sounded like an oriole flying out of a valley. It was especially pleasing to the ear. The light from the gaps in the carriage's curtains shone on the gold and pearl hair ornament in her hair. The light and elegant halo swayed and shone. It made her skin even whiter than snow and her appearance surpass others. Bing Tang lowered his head and played with a small wooden box that was 3 inches long and as wide as a thumb. He hid his hatred towards the Chao family very well. Qin Yining, on the other hand, did not hold back and openly admired the beauty. Chao Yuqing spat out a fruit pit. She looked up and met Qin Yining's face. She couldn't help but smile slightly. "Fourth Miss, why are you looking at this concubine like this? Ani Chao's appearance is enough to topple cities. Everyone loves beauty. Since I am fortunate enough to ride in the same carriage, I naturally have to seize the opportunity to take a few more glances." Qin Yining said with a smile and a serious expression. If these words were said by a man, it would be an undisguised flirtation. But facing Qin Yining's serious expression, it was hard to feel any disgust. Chao Yuqing smiled and said, "Fourth Miss is joking. This concubine is already middle-aged. How can I still have the appearance to topple cities? But fourth miss is right. In front of a beauty, I have to seize the opportunity to take a few more glances. She threw the storybook aside and lazily propped up half of her body with her elbow. She began to admire Qin Yining. There was no hostility in her eyes. When she looked at Qin Yining's face, it was as if she was admiring a precious antique. If Qin Yining was an ordinary girl, she would have blushed by now. But that was not the case. She only felt that if Chao Yuqing wanted to look at her, then so be it. Anyway, she had looked at Chao Yuqing a lot, so it was fair. Besides, they were both women, so there was no need to care so much. Gradually, the way Chao Yuqing looked at Qin Yining's pretty face became even more gentle. Her gaze was so warm that it felt like spring water. His eyes gradually became empty, as if he was looking at someone else through Qin Yining. Qin Yining was keenly aware of the change in the atmosphere. When he thought of everyone's evaluation of his looks, he understood what was going on. Now that Qin Huaiyuan had grown a beard and had grown older, his temperament had changed. He was certainly no longer the man who was famous in the capital when he was young. Now, Qin Huaiyuan was an elegant and handsome middle-aged man with an air of immortality. What Chao Yuqing saw through his face was probably that Qin Huaiyuan, who didn't grow a beard when he was young and was known as the Wise Panin. How long has Annie known my father? Qin Yining's words brought Chao Yuqing back to her senses. She blinked and smiled, knowing each other is mutual. So we haven't really known each other for long. However, before I got married, I saw the Marquis and Madame at a palace banquet. Qin Yining nodded in understanding. In fact, he could see that Chao Yuqing liked his father. It didn't matter whether Chao Yuqing was the daughter of the Chao Guizhong or not, nor did it matter why Chao Yuqing invited his mother to live in the palace, or what role she played in all this. It was undeniable that Chao Yuqing was extremely polite and restrained in front of his father. She even catered to him carefully. This kind of catered not only to fight for his favor, but also because she truly liked him. Before Chao Yuqing got married, his father should have been in his 30s. 30 years old was the prime of a man's life. He had lost his youthfulness and was at his most handsome, mature, and stable age. It was a pity that he was old when he was born. Qin Yining smiled faintly. Recently, Annie. Before he could finish, the carriage shook violently. The horses neighed, and then the guard scolded. "Who are you?" Qin Yining's heart trembled, and he hurriedly lifted the curtain to look outside. Chao Yuqing also lifted the curtain. Outside the carriage, they saw a group of men dressed like poor commoners. Each of them wore rags and held sticks in their hands. There were also a few people who held knives. There were more than 20 people surrounding the carriage. At this time, they were in the middle of nowhere. There were forests on both sides of the road. The road to the fairy temple was straight and clear, but there was no one passing by. Qin Yining shrank back into the carriage in fright. Seeing that Chao Yuqing was still looking outside, he hurriedly pulled her back. "Annie, be careful, and don't show your face." Did this person want to cause trouble? With her appearance, if the mountain bandits saw her, even if they didn't have any evil intentions, they would have evil intentions. What should we do? What should we do? Bing Tang anxiously pulled Qin Yining. Chao Yuqing was also supported by the old mama surnamed Liu. The two of them were trembling. The mountain bandits outside the carriage had already rushed up and fought with the guards. When the sticks collided, Qin Yining heard a rough man shouting, "That woman is very beautiful. Take her back and make her the wife of the bandit chief." Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing looked at each other, and their faces were filled with fear. At this time, we can only take a gamble. Qin Yining casually pulled out a silver hairpin from his hair and held it in his hand. Quickly find something that can be used as a weapon. Quickly prepare it. But they have knives. Chao Yuqing also learned from Qin Yining and pulled out a hairpin to hold. Who knew that as soon as he finished speaking, several screams could be heard from outside the carriage. It was the family Qin's guards who had been beheaded outside the carriage. A steel knife stained with blood lifted the curtain of the carriage, and a rough man with thick eyebrows poked his head in. Although his face was covered by a cloth and his face couldn't be seen clearly, when he saw Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing, he couldn't hide the amazement in his eyes. TSK, this little girl is really beautiful. As he spoke, he reached out his large hand towards Qin Yining's face. Qin Yining gritted his teeth and glared at the man. The moment his hand came close, he suddenly stabbed the hairpin into it. The man was caught off guard. Not only was there a bloody hole in his arm, but there was also a cut. Blood immediately spurted out. Ah! The man retreated. When his companions saw that he was injured, they all laughed loudly. The man was furious. He pointed the tip of his knife at Qin Yining and cursed, "Stupid girl, you're courting death." As he spoke, he threw away his knife and pounced forward. Qin Yining used all his strength to fight with the man. Although she was strong, she didn't know martial arts. Out of the 4 women in the carriage, she was the only one who could hold up. Chao Yuqing and senior servant Liu were so frightened that their faces turned pale and their bodies went limp. They didn't even dare to move. Bing Tang's resistance was ignored in their eyes. In the end, the 4 women were still caught. Chao Yuqing was so frightened that she screamed and fainted. Senior servant Liu supported her with tears and snot. Bing Tang was a bit calmer, but his face was also pale and his body was trembling. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.